Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated, everyone. And welcome to the July 27th meeting of City Council. If I could have a motion to approve the agenda with the additions.
So moved.
The seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes from the June 22nd meeting of City Council. Councilor Young, seconder, please. Okay. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have public notice and bylaws. The first report relates to proposed low-rise apartment building on 15th Avenue. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. From Planning Commission, application for a zoning bylaw amendment. It is a discretionary use application for proposed low-rise apartment building, and the address is 1431 15th Avenue. If I could have a seconder, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councilor Hinks moves that.
Thanks very much. So if you are familiar with the south entrance to the General Hospital, you'll note that there is an empty lot there. It used to be a church at one time, and they're proposing a modest four-story building here with 18 units. There are 19 parking stalls, of which underground is included here. And we thought this was a great location, and we thought this was a very good plan, and saw no issue. And I will speak just briefly to the notion of parking. Felt that with the current arrangement and what this building will do, in other words, house all of its own vehicles, that the parking really wouldn't be affected. You note that the Community Association, despite being asked twice, did not respond, so we take that as affirmative. Look for concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Are there speakers to the report? Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm concerned about the parking issue here. There's 18 units. There's parking stalls for 19 cars, which means that there's no parking stalls for visitor parking. I think in this particular area of the city, given the difficulty we've had with parking in the vicinity of the hospital, that we should be very slow to approve an apartment building that has no visitor parking provisions in it. There will be visitors to this building. Parking for the hospital is difficult. The report indicates that parking is not the responsibility of the developer. Indeed, I think that parking in this case is the responsibility of the General Hospital, but given that they don't appear to be acting, I don't think that either the developer or the city can ignore the fact that parking is a problem. So I would like to see this go forward only if there was additional visitor parking.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. I don't know if there's any comment from the administration on this one. Ms. Folk?
Through you, Mr. Worship, the development does meet, has more parking requirement or stalls than what's required in the zoning bylaw. There is also 2 hours street parking, which is permitted on the north side of 15th Avenue and the east side of St. John Street. And I'll ask Mr. Searle if he has anything to add.
Your Worship, nothing further to add. As Ms. Folk indicated, the development meets the minimum parking requirements. There is on-street parking provided. The other thing to note with the proposal is that it is located in close proximity to the hospital, which is a major employment center, and there is the potential that people who reside at this location would be able to may also work at the hospital and would be walking to work instead of using their vehicle on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mr. Searle. Other questions or comments on the report before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next report, 79 from Planning Commission. This is a road closure on Quebec Street. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So I'm going to refer to the written document that you have in front of you because there was some different cut and paste, I think it was, on the on what you had in your electronic version. So this is an application for a road closure 4th Avenue North, adjacent to 155 and 207 Quebec Street. If I could have a seconder, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councilor Hinks.
Thanks very much. So there is no road. but it is somewhere on a map somewhere that it exists, and we've talked about these kinds of things before. There are two properties along here that have been using this area, and so it's probably in our wisdom just to sell that portion to them, gain some revenue, and it's never going to be a road. So we're closing something that sits on a map but is usable to two businesses. We would seek concurrence on this, please.
Discussion on the report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two bylaws. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to move those two public notice bylaws. The first one is seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaws number 2015-49 and 2015-51 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider two bylaws relating to these two reports that have been considered by the Planning Commission. Bylaw 215-49 respecting the proposed zoning to develop an 18-unit low-rise apartment building, and Bylaw 215-51 respecting the proposed sale and closure of an undeveloped portion of 4th Avenue right-of-way. If there is anyone present in the gallery this evening who would like to address council on either of these bylaws, I would ask that you indicate your intentions at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on just one moment. When we get to the second reading, we can have a discussion.
It's a procedural matter.
Okay.
Your Worship, I'm wondering if we can't separate these two votes. I intend to withhold unanimous approval for the first, but I'm happy to approve the unanimous approval for the second. So
Okay, we can
perhaps
separate
it makes
the two.
sense to separate them.
So with the acknowledgement of council, we will take the vote on 51. We can do 49. Well, we'll do 49 first. Do that then separate. So I'll call the question on report or bylaw 49. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councilor Murray.
Okay, Your Worship, so then we're going to continue on then.
Just with 49.
For 49.
Yes.
So I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that bylaw number 2015-49 be read a second time.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that council hereby consents to reading of bylaw 2015-49 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's not carried unanimously. This will be carried to the next council meeting. We'll move on to bylaw 51. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I rise, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaw 2015-51 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that bylaw 2015-51 be read a second time.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2015-51 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaw 2015-51 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Murray. Move on to delegations and related reports. First one is D 1551. Andy Livingston. If you could please come forward. You could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
I'm Andy Livingston, and I'm here to represent the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. Is it still not? Okay. I'll just yell louder, it's fine. As I said, my name is Andy Livingston, and I'm here on behalf of the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to submit these comments in relation to the accessible taxi cab service in Regina. The Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission appreciates the work carried out by the administration. The Commission would also like to recognize the time and effort put forward by administration in working with the Commission and community members to improve accessible taxicab service in the City of Regina. The Commission supports the recommendation for 8 accessible taxi licenses to be allocated in 2015. This should improve levels of service and access to people with disabilities that make use of accessible cabs in Regina. By approving this recommendation, the city will be meeting its target of reaching an acceptable, accessible taxi cab ratio by 2017. From the preliminary trip data provided from a segment of the current accessible cabs, it would appear that there has been a significant increase, more than double, in the number of trips taken from September 2014 to March 2015. The feedback from stakeholder groups also indicates a need for an increased number of accessible taxi licenses, especially during peak times. And if I could just go off script just a little bit, that is usually around the school trips, so early in the morning and around the commencement of school. Citizens of the municipality have indicated through ATSAC that there is still a significant inability to receive taxi cab service during peak hours, indicating the current level of cabs available are not meeting the needs of people with disabilities. A more effective analysis of trip data will be available once the reporting becomes mandatory in December 2015. Furthermore, the increase in accessible taxi cab licenses will assist in relieving some of the burden from the city paratransit service. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Flegel?
Sure, I'll go. Thanks, and thanks for coming forward. And I know you spoke at the Community Protective, but the questions, there was some discussion before or after you spoke. They're asking for 8, but would you like to see a gradual fill? Because if you go 4 and 4 or 4 and 6, then you'll know. Plus the low floor buses, and I'm going to ask administration about that, maybe having an impact. Have you seen from your user groups 2 things? If the low floor buses seem to help, have you noticed that? And also, if we were to add 4 and then 4 next year, would that work as well to see a gradual increase if needed?
I think the feedback from the user group was that getting the 8 out as soon as possible would be the most effective method, because during peak times, I mean, one issue is that during these peak times there are a significant desire to use the cab service. So currently it's obviously not meeting the needs. But in terms of the low floor buses, I think that has been a positive step. But there is a lot of other factors that increase the accessibility of those bus stops. Sure. So it's not always possible for those individuals with a higher level of disability to use the low floor, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay. If I could, Mr. Mayor, through you, is the statistic you used was September to March. That is typically the peak user time as well, right, for needing the service. What do you think would happen in April to October or September?
Some might argue that with the increased level, I mean, individuals might participate in more summer activities. So you might also see a significant increase during that time, because the majority of people with disabilities tend to go out in the summer when there's no snow. But, I mean, it does. You are correct. It is the peak time of when, right, during the winter months, those cabs are used. So it's difficult to say. And, I mean, once the reporting becomes mandatory in December, you'll be able to get a more accurate picture of, right, of how the data is affected, and a bigger data set, which will allow, right, obviously a greater form of analysis.
But if I could, through you again, so let's just put data aside. From what you're hearing from your groups, is there adequate supply of cabs, paratransit, from April to September?
No.
No. Okay. Perfect. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Evening, Mr. Livingston.
How are you?
I'm good.
Oops, sorry.
No, it's all good. You have my attention now. So tell me, am I right that you're from Saskatoon?
I am, so I appreciate being put on early. Thank
Well,
you.
well, welcome. I want to ask a little bit about Saskatoon and the situation there, because references have been made, but of course, we're not from Saskatoon. So you seem to have more cabs in Saskatoon, and how does that play out, and what can you tell me that I would need to know?
Well, we do have, I shouldn't say we, because the city does have more taxis available. It also has a more significant private hire service, which does take some of the burden off their paratransit service and in turn their taxi cabs. So yes, there is. I believe it's. Ms. Lai would be able to speak to this more, but I think it's 27 cabs currently.
We can check on that, yeah.
In September, in Saskatoon.
Thanks. There's been some changes in terms of not just paratransit, but now low-floor buses are uniform, and now a few more licenses have been issued over the past while, using Regina as the example.
Right.
But I'm not sure, and this is a question we asked at committee, that everybody understands that there are more licenses available. So can you speak a little bit to information, to getting the word out, and how do we make people aware that this service is available?
I think more can be done, but I think the administration should get some credit. They have been doing, from what I understand, more community work at various trade shows and community events. I think the commission has worked hard also to make it known that these are available. I believe the administration also produced pamphlets that were available for the users. But I think you are correct. More could be done. But I also think the increase in usership, I guess is the word, is a sign that people are aware that they're available, because we were hearing that at times prior to the one significant increase in the proposed increase, that a number of people didn't even try to get cabs. So I think more people are attempting to participate in the community and use the service. So that might be a reason for the increase as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Bryce. My apologies, I can't see you.
My apologies. I think that does go down, if I'm not mistaken, but I just wanted to ask you one question. What is your comment to some taxi cab industries that say we're not busy enough with accessible cabs to actually make it viable to have more licenses out there for it?
I mean, that's obviously their opinion, but you have to remember that an accessible cab is still a regular cab when it's not dealing with accessible fares. So they can pick up regular fares if and when they choose. The priority has to be given to the accessibles, but if they're claiming they're not busy enough with accessible fares, then they have the option to pick up regular fares.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the delegation just answered my question, but maybe I'll ask it specifically. Thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering, is there a problem with accessible cabs taking fares from people who are not physically challenged? Is that causing a problem?
Well, assuming there is no accessible fares available, a driver is free to pick up who they wish. According to, I'm not really 100% familiar with the industry, but I assume it's done on a like a region basis, or where they go into areas. So as long as they're in the queue of that area, then they're free to pick up those fares, assuming there isn't an accessible fare. If there's an accessible fare in their system, they are in a position where they have to pick up those fares. But it shouldn't, one, not be available at the time. They're free to pick up regular fares.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one question for you, Mr. Livingston. First, thank you for coming and appearing this evening. One of the issues that I noted in reading some of the background material is kind of the I guess, credibility of the data that's available. I'm just wondering, from your user group perspective, do they meet on any kind of regular basis with the brokers to talk about issues for disabled transportation?
We haven't met with the brokers. I believe the city administration have. But we meet on when we first struck the group, we met, oh goodness, a number of times initially. But now we meet on a biannual basis where things are reported to the committee, certain administration gets feedback from the group, and also we bring forward issues that the focus group might be experiencing. So it's on a biannual basis at this time.
But there hasn't been any formal sort of dialogue with the brokers and the...
Not through our group. It may be something we look at should administration see it as viable.
Okay. Just one other quick question. I know last time I think council approved an additional 6 licenses. The feedback you got from your user group, were those fully utilized and taken advantage of as soon as they were implemented?
My understanding is that yes, they were used, and the uptake has been fairly significant according to the small data set that is currently available. As I stated earlier, a larger data set will be available at the end of 2015, and at that point I'm sure administration will have a better idea of the uptake, but and be able to give a clearer picture of the use of those licenses. But I would expect it to be fairly significant based on the small data set that we have already.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Are there other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much for answering questions and making a presentation. We'll now move on to our next delegation, Mr. Daniel Vandekamp. If you could please come forward and state your name, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Oh, right, okay. Hey, my name's Del Vandekamp, and I represent Van Diest Accessible Transit. I've heard a lot of comments, and some things are right and some things aren't. And what I'm here today to ask the City Council is that there isn't enough information to the public, but the CABs have been keeping statistics. We've spent over tens of thousands of dollars tracking the whole system, with walk-ons accessible, and our data to date does not show that we warrant another 8 vehicles at this time. Now, so I'm asking City Council until the statistics come in that December, January, and February to hold off, and when we see in March, we'll analyze all that, and we'll have some information. I mean, we're tracking all the trips minute to minute. And these other committees, I don't know where they're getting their information. It's hearsay or whatever. But the accessible cabs aren't regulated until that December, January, and February. So I'm asking City Council to hold off for another 6 months. Your goal is to February of 17. This is only July of 15. So we got a year and a half to get the figures right. What I'm scared of, if we put these 8 on, and we're going to find out by our statistics that they're not needed. What do you do with the 8 vehicles that are on the road now and guys have spent this money? So I'm saying wait 6 months, let's get the figures right. And the cab brokers wouldn't be up here if we felt that it was justified to having these 8. We've been up here numerous times. We keep saying, where are the statistics? Well, we'll have them for you. So I just don't want to, well, what do these guys do with 8 vehicles? They're sitting doing nothing. And right now, putting these 6 on, there's vans now that don't do a trip a day or 1 trip a day or 2 trips a day. Not even that. So we're going to put on 8 more? And what's happening, it's dividing the cab industry. They're saying, well, this guy got a free plate for putting this on, and he's not doing anything accessible. He's taking up our regular customers, which the quota is 1 to every 1,250. So when you get the 18 cabs, they're not doing that, or 10, then they're taking business away from those other cabs, which the ratio was 1,250. So it's causing problems in the cab industry. Doesn't matter whether it's Co-op, Capital, or my company, or Regina, or whatever. Well, I'm saying, let's make the right decision, wait till the statistics come out, and then go from there. Like previous letters, I said, why not the cab industry meet with some of these community services, human rights, before this goes to City Council and get it right. We used to do it when we started. I've had a cab since 20 years now. When Dr. Brandt was the head of it in 95, we met with the committees. And we met with the city. There was an ultimate on it. We got it straight. We got it right. But this, we're not getting it right. Because brokers go to the city. The city says, okay, that's fine. Then the communities go to the city and say this. Well, we got to have a two-way conversation with human rights, the committees, and get it right. I mean, for 20 years, we had 4 vans, okay? Then we put on 6. That's more than double. And now we want to put on 8 within a year? You're going to kill the cab business. Not only the drivers. So we got 400 drivers to 500 drivers saying, well, we want to come up to City Hall. I says, geez, it'd take a week time you went through them all. Let the brokers do it. Their concerns.
Mr. Van Camp, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, and find out that way. Now, I want to say something about paratransit, is that last year with the new committee that they have, or whatever they're doing, they've improved twice, because probably half my customers, more than half my customers, use both taxis and paratransit, and they found a big, from I think 2,000 to 1,300 that aren't getting cabs, but the cabs are getting those, the rest of them. So let's wait and do it right.
I'm sorry, your time is up now, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You may be able to, on questions, to add
Sure.
your information, but I have to stop you at 5 minutes. Are there questions? Councilor Fraser?
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, do you have anything else to add?
Pardon?
Do you have anything else to add? I'm sorry, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I was just saying about paratransit is that in the last little while, they have been improving. The reason why I know this, I talk to the customers daily, and they say it's getting better. And there's only one thing on Sundays there that they have trouble getting cabs for. They have 8 or 9 buses working where they should have maybe 10, 12. And, but, I mean, I think they're improving quite a bit. From my comments, from my customers' comments, coming back here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And are there questions of the delegation? Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just out of curiosity, a follow-up, you mentioned the brokers have been keeping quite accurate statistics, and I'm just curious, like the last question I asked the previous delegation, that with the 6 new licenses, they felt they were utilized in a good way. What are your findings on the last 6 licenses?
That's why we're here. We're even finding the 6th now. It's an oversupply. That's why we're here.
By how much? Do you have estimates of how big of an oversupply we've got?
Well, like I said before, some cabs are doing 9 a day, and some are doing 1, some doing 2, I guess 4, and you got 10 cabs. So I'm just, what if you put on 8 more and they're not warranted? What happens?
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm just saying, let's do it right, get the statistics, because the cab companies have them. They got tens of thousands of dollars invested in computers. We know every trip, whether accessible or walk-ons, to the minute. How long it takes there, how long the trip is, so forth, whatever. So let's wait for those statistics and do it right. I mean, I have no regrets if they want to put on 50. That's fine. But let's wait for the statistics. And we can't really compare Saskatoon to Regina. There's a big difference, and I don't have time to go into that. So let's talk about Regina, not Saskatoon.
Just following up on a question I think Councillor Flagel had raised about maybe phasing them in. From your perspective, if we decided to meet the sort of what appears to be a demand on one side.
That's fine. I sort of agree with that, but I'm saying let's wait till those statistics come in, whether we need 3, 4, 5, or 3. Let's wait for them. It's only 6 months from now. And your goal is to 2017. Well, this is only 2015. We're rushing the whole thing. Let's get it right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other questions? Councillor Flagel.
Excuse me, thanks for coming forward. I'm interested and curious we always do comparisons, but can you give me a Reader's Digest of why Saskatoon is so different in the accessible cabs compared to Regina? Because a cab is a cab, paratransit. So what's the biggest differences? Don't give me a half hour, but give me like 2 minutes.
Good couple of minutes. Okay, well, it's a bigger surrounding area. It's got bridges going over there. I don't think they do a lot of rural work to bring people in from the surrounding areas, which Regina really doesn't. There's maybe the bus service isn't quite as good up there. Things like that. There's a lot of.
Okay.
But
I'm going to ask you this question, and I think it was raised last meeting. I may ask it again too, but identifying an accessible cab over a regular cab. Like if you go to a parking lot, you see a big blue emblem on the asphalt. Do you identify the accessible cabs any different than you would a regular cab? Because people seem, the discussion was, and the discussion a bit was, people don't know that the accessible cabs are even out there. So is there an identity that you guys need to do or change?
No. I've been in it 20 years. I had the first one. All the nursing homes, hospitals, nurses, everybody knows about paratransit and the cabs.
But are they identified any differently?
Well, you see them on the street driving.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got signs on them, everything. I mean, that's not an issue.
Okay. No, it was just something that was discussed the other day, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation. This is a co-op taxi. I'm not sure who actually will be speaking from that group, but you can identify yourself. You have 5 minutes for a presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you. Dwight Mickleborough, manager of Co-op Taxi. This is a formal request to address the city about a meeting held on July 27th. And we would like to advise the council that even with the increase in trip volume for accessible taxis, there's not a significant increase in the volume to constitute increasing the number of accessible taxis. Since January of 2015, we have dispatched a total of 1,048 wheelchair trips. With 4 vehicles working 24/7, the average number of wheelchair trips works out to less than 2 per vehicle per day, with Co-op having the largest number of wheelchair accessible taxis at 4. Co-op Taxi also advises or advertises on Facebook with business cards, our website, and a mobile taxi app. We also have an account with Paratransit and several seniors' residences in the city, which would increase our trip totals for the accessible taxis. But the numbers show that there's not enough of a trip volume to validate adding more accessible taxi plates. The 30% increase showing since September 2014 until March 2015 was largely due to winter months preventing the overall usage of taxis. There was also winter plates, and that increased the overall fleet by 37% as well. Since there is not enough business for the wheelchair accessible taxis, They take regular trips, just like the rest, and reducing the income of the regular taxi operators. And they are still capable of handling the volume of accessible taxi trips currently available to them. Our recommendation to the council would be to allow only 4 accessible taxis at this time, and for the lottery in 2015, and then convert the 6 regular taxi plates that will be coming back to the city in 2017 to accessible taxi plates, bringing the total to 10 accessible taxi plates instead of the proposed 8 by the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions? Councillor O'Donnell.
Hi, Dwight.
Hi, Mike.
I want to just quiz you on a couple of things. One of the things you mentioned is about Facebook cards and so on like that. So you've made an effort to go out and reach out to people so they know you have the service.
Oh, yes.
Have you noted in the last while, or have your drivers known in the last while, that you are gaining new patrons, not a usual clientele? Can you comment on that at all?
Well, I can't specifically say for sure there, but I know that the 4 fellows that have it on, it is a large expense for them to get that van equipped and whatever.
Yep.
And so they're somewhat disappointed in the trip numbers for them. So I couldn't say if they're just maintaining the service that was there before, which I think is more likely.
Okay. Is there a number? Is there, well, you've referenced the number of trips that you're currently doing.
Mm-hmm.
If a year from now or 2 years from now or whatever, you came to me and said, this is how many we're doing a day and this is making sense. Is the number 6 or 8 or 10 per day? I'm wondering if you've done some math that way.
Well, it would have to increase probably to, we'll say, 8. Because right now, the guys are not that busy when it's less than 2 trips per day.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're out there 24/7, those 4 vans. So, you know, when we say put on some now, yeah, we're not saying that isn't fair, but when those other plates that were originally brought out as taxi plates back, I guess it would be 3 years ago, we don't need those plates very badly. So what I'm saying is these wheelchair plates are cutting into the business of the rest of the cabs.
Yep.
So when these become available in 2017, let's just transfer those over to the wheelchairs, and that'll be 6 more right then. 4 now, 6 later. We have 10 overall, which is more than 8, and, you know,
Okay.
that's
Understood.
our...
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for your time and your presentation here tonight. Obviously, the prospects of somebody waiting for a taxi, you know, it's a different scenario for those waiting and those who are providing the service. People have to wait too long, it's bad for those waiting. And obviously, if the drivers can't make money, that's bad for the industry as well, or, you know, bad for the system. Is there anything the city can do to help increase the amount of taxi rides being taken in the city?
You're talking in general, or
Yeah.
just at peak times, or
Well,
times?
in general, it's a cultural piece, I guess, as far as sort of increasing how people use taxis in Regina.
Well, the city's growing, of course, so there's going to be more demand for taxis as we get larger and larger. But I know the fellow that spoke on behalf of the human rights there. We have our 4 out there all the time, and we don't load them on school runs. So they are there at the peak hours, and it's difficult for anything in peak hours to get, you know, in there to this trip, to that trip. You could be on the high north end and you have to go, we'll say, close to downtown. Like it takes some time to travel in traffic. So you can't just say because you can't get a cab at peak times, try going to the bank on the end of the month. It's the same thing. They don't put on any more ladies at the tills than they possibly could. And that's a comparison I could make there.
Okay, those who are operating a accessible license right now, should we presume that they're making less money than somebody operating a non-accessible license?
No, they're not. Because at our company, as I'm sure the other ones, you're put on when you clear after any trip, you're put on the list on the computer, and that as soon as you get to the top of that list, you're going to get the trip in that zone, no matter if it's groceries or whatever. So.
And supposing an accessible call comes in, we assume that it does take priority?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a trip, if that accessible taxi's been dispatched to a certain address and a trip comes in, it's much the same as we do with our vans. Somebody needs a van or accessible taxi, and you're not there yet, they can tell by the computer, they change your trip.
Okay.
So they do get the priority. But, when you have only 6 right now, it's a big area, so it does take some time in traffic. That's all I can say for that.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll go on to our last delegation. Sandy Archibald. You could identify yourself, who you represent. You as well have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there will be questions afterwards.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Archibald, and I'm speaking on behalf of Regina Cabs. We don't agree with the issuance of 8 accessible taxicab owners' licenses via a lottery at this time. The report sets out that there's support for these lotto licenses. But why is that? Are the respondents truly interested in providing the wheelchair accessible service? Perhaps, but through our experience and from listening to others in the industry, the accessible lotto licenses are desirable because the lotto winner gets his own free taxi license first, and the winner doesn't have to drive the vehicle, nor is there any real requirement to provide accessible service to the public. Yes, the winner will have to provide a vehicle that meets the bylaw standards, but that investment is viewed as a cost of entry for a free license for the foreseeable future. Since 2012, 18 lotto winners have been awarded lotto licenses, and that equates to a 15% increase in taxis on Regina streets. The demand for taxi service has not increased 15%. And today, every taxi driver is already subsidizing the previous lotto winners, and we know the economy is starting to soften here in the city and the province, and ridership has slowed as well. If 8 accessible taxi licenses are issued now, that would be an additional 5.6% increase in taxis. So in less than 3 years, there'd be approximately 21% increase in taxis on the roads year-round, with some additional winter plates as well. The industry has to be viable for both the users and the drivers in order to be successful. Accessible taxis can and do take regular taxi trips the majority of the time. So all these lotto winners, lotto licenses have resulted in a reduction in the earnings of all taxi drivers in Regina. The proposed 8 licenses will eat further into each driver's income. Certainly, it is a worthy goal to increase the number of accessible taxi licenses because that should provide more efficient service to the customer. But in reality, there is no requirement for the accessible lotto winner to provide that service. Even if City Transit wants to move some paratransit customers onto taxis through the brokerages, the brokers have no real ability to guarantee that that service can be provided, because the accessible lotto operator can decline to provide the service without significant consequences. As well, there is no requirement for any specific number of these lotto licenses to be associated with any specific brokerage in order to spread out the vehicles across the industry. This recommendation looks like an opportunity for the city to meet their target, pass off the challenges to the industry, with the likely outcome of a nebulous benefit to the users of the accessible taxi service. But it's a windfall for a few who win the lotto licenses, and a detriment to all drivers in the industry who will subsidize the lotto winners by taking a further reduction in the earnings. As well, each lottery the city runs earns revenue for the city, and where is the money going? The administration advised at the Community and Protective Services Committee meeting that the $17,300 earned through the prior accessible taxi lottery was the full expense of operating a lottery. The industry has asked the administration for an accounting of the revenue earned and expenses associated with the taxicab lotteries, and have been told to use an access to information request because the administration won't provide it. We estimate $100,000 has been raised through the 3 lotteries to date. The Cities Act sets out that a municipality can only charge and collect fees for the cost of administering and regulating the activity. So where is the excess approximately $50,000 going? When will it be used to reduce the licensing costs to the industry as a whole, since the revenue to all drivers has been reduced? As well, the process was mandated in the taxi bylaw to compel the industry to provide trip data to the city from the computerized dispatch systems. That data would be used to analyze the demand for service and the need for future taxi licenses. Why aren't we waiting for the data to make these decisions? The industry was led to believe that that's what the process would be. The industry has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on computerized systems, but the data analysis is not being used to make decisions. To date, the industry has forwarded 3 monthly quarters of aggregate numbers to the city. The city still doesn't have 1 complete year's worth of data. We request that the city wait for the data, do an analysis, consult with the industry and the users in a meaningful way to develop solutions that will yield results for the taxi riding public and make sense to the industry and to the city as well. In the alternative, if there's such an urgent matter that cannot wait for the mandated data to be analyzed, we recommend that 4 accessible lotto licenses be issued in 2015, and then when the 6 lotto licenses that were issued in 2012, when they're recalled, we recommend converting those lotto licenses to accessible taxi licenses. This isn't the message that people want to hear, but this is the reality from our perspective in the industry. I thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Archibald, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks. Good evening. Just a comment that'll lead into a question. So we could have done this at community and had an end to it, but I wanted to bring this forward to council, so we had a choice. So I want to just be understand. I want to make sure that your voice was heard. That's one. 2, my question is this. I'm going to go back to my 9 years on council, and I'm going to tell you that every time we've had an issue in terms of whether it is cameras in cabs or the number of licenses or so on, the industry has come forward and said, no, this is horrible, this is terrible. And yet the industry seems to have carried on. What's the difference today from the discussions that we've had before? And just so you understand, and drivers have told me that they like having cameras in their cabs and feel safer, but that's an aside issue. What's the difference today from the other discussions we've had along the way?
I think where things started to head in a more challenging direction was with the taxi study. I mean, it certainly was popular all across Canada where studies were being done, but that kind of all of a sudden ground what the industry and the various brokers were doing on, in their own channel. Then all of a sudden you had to focus on this study, which was a huge thing, and everybody was heading down certain paths, whether it was with camera, computerized dispatch, things were moving in that direction, but the study kind of slammed everybody to say, okay, you got to focus on this, so everything else was kind of ground to a halt. The cameras, with all due respect, we waited forever to get the data on what was acceptable because people wanted to install them, and they said, no, wait. So it was a challenge. With these lotto licenses, things have to be viable. They have to be viable for the users and for the industry. And I think we've heard a delegation here tonight and the fellow from the Human Rights as well saying, let's meet. And I think that's an important thing. We used to have those meetings between the users, the providers, and the administration, so everybody could kind of see where everybody else was coming from and what works and what doesn't work and what people could do better. And right now, one of the challenges is if a lotto winner doesn't want to provide that service, they can kind of go dark, go off the grid as it is, as we're in the computer system, and not provide that service because it may be a short trip, it may be too much work, it may be across town, it may be whatever. So everybody's got to be at the table and prepared to provide their input to yield the results that the city wants, the industry wants, and certainly the users want.
Okay. If we threw out a number of plates tomorrow, 1, 2, 5, 8, whatever the number's going to be, there's going to be people lined up at the door. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Because, as I said, they see it as a free taxi license first.
But there is a fee attached to it, just as there was 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
There is a fee, and then they do have to supply a vehicle, you're right. But then once they have, it's kind of a job for life, because those licenses are lifetime licenses. Mm-hmm. So they've got
but not free. Not free.
Well, okay.
No debating. This is the point we're debating here, so let's be careful.
I'm good.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you for coming forward, Ms. Archibald. What is the fee for the city charges for a taxi license?
$375, but $375, but $100 every time you transfer.
And so $375 plus you have to supply a vehicle. Is that right?
Correct.
And is it, say you have a license, is it possible to resell that license?
Not the accessible licenses, no.
What about the non-accessible licenses?
Those are transferable, yeah.
And what's the going rate for a transferable, non-accessible license?
Just depends on what the willing buyer is willing to sell, or
I understand
seller and
that,
buyer.
But what would you, can you tell us in your opinion what one of those licenses would sell for today?
It's what somebody wants to pay.
Give me a number, please.
Not prepared to.
You're not prepared to. Why not?
Because it's between the buyer and the seller. It's their business. It's not mine.
Is it fair to say that it'd be over 100,000?
It may be. It is in Saskatoon, so it probably is here.
Can you get over 150?
I'm not prepared to answer.
Is it fair to say it's a very valuable commodity?
It's like anything in the, like, every jurisdiction, most jurisdictions in North America are a closed licensing system similar to Regina, and the licenses have developed a value over the years because the people who've been in the business operating them have provided a level of service over the years. So yes, they have gained value. Just like when you sell a restaurant that has a liquor license, it's going to have more value than one that's just a pop stand. Like when you have when you sell a radio station that has a license with a certain wattage, I'm not sure even what the right phrase is, it's going to have more value than one that doesn't have it. So, I mean, certainly values have, in closed market systems, values have developed over the years, like here, like in New York, like in Vancouver, like in Saskatoon, like in most cities in North America.
And if it's a very valuable commodity, it must be because purchasers, prospective purchasers, think there's a demand in the industry that gives the license value. Is that correct?
Well, any demand has been created from the people who've invested their time and energy over the years to develop a users and a client base and a reputation. And if brokers only earn their money, their revenue, shall I say, from taxi cab operators. So the more taxi cab operators you have operating with your brokerage, the more money. So then, being a broker, I'd say, put the 8 out because someone's going to earn money. One of the brokerages is going to earn money. So I mean, it makes sense, but it's got to be logical from everybody's standpoint. Because if you swamp the industry with too many licenses and people can't earn their living, and the service goes down, the quality of vehicle goes down, the quality of drivers go down, it doesn't necessarily serve anybody's
But the taxi license is valuable because there's demand in the industry for the service you're providing.
Sorry?
Taxi license is valuable on resale because there's a demand in the industry for the service that you're providing.
That's a statement or a question?
Yes or no, I guess. I'm asking for your opinion.
People in the industry have worked long and hard to develop provide a service, and certainly their value has developed around that, like any other closed system, like any other system in city in North America.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Hinks.
It's interesting that you compare to real estate values or business values. Now, those sales are public. Like, I can look up what everything is sold for, and you're unwilling to share with us what the value of plates are here in Regina. Are you willing to tell me what the last one you sold was, how much it was?
I don't think I was referring to anything in real estate. I was talking, okay, yeah, restaurants. Okay, I see what you're saying. I'm not sure that those are public. I don't know.
So how would we get that information? Like in real estate or businesses, we can get that information. Why is it so closed with the taxi industry?
It's just the way it's been over the number of years across, this city I don't think is any different than anywhere else. But these licenses don't have a value. I mean, they do have a value because you have them lifetime. So, I mean, when you have one, you have it, you can lease it out, you can have it until, God forbid, the day someone passes away, and then the license reverts back to the city.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Councillor Fundura.
Thank you, Worship, through you. The amount of cabs we have right now in Regina on the streets, especially the accessible ones, or any other cabs, what I'm hearing is that you may be lucky to accessible cab could be working maybe 2 trips. So what would be the problem if we put 8 more? Where are the winners, where are the losers?
Well, again, I think the best thing to do would be to have some sort of meeting up between the users, the service providers, and the administration to go with, if you're going to increase the number. We're kind of past that now because those meetings have already taken place, so that's why we're saying put 4 out now, let's have some meaningful meetings, and then hopefully convert those 6 lotto ones, when they were called, convert those into accessible. So then we'll have, we've already got 10 out there, we'll have 4, 14, and 6 more, I'll make it 20. It'll be very comparable to Saskatoon.
Okay, through your worship, hearing from the other delegation saying is that we could do fine the way we are now, like we don't need any more. So if I call in, let's say if I call in for accessible taxi at any time of the day, I know that it's not given that cab is going to be there instantly as a wait. What would I find out there? The way we are right now with the accessible cabs we have and regular taxis, what kind of a wait are we waiting? Any calls that are dropped, anyone that's been left out there at any time?
So how long a wait for an accessible taxi?
Right.
Again, peak hours are a little bit of a challenge for anything moving around the city, definitely. You should be able to have one, within 15 to 20 minutes sort of thing. I mean, depending on where you are in the city and where the vehicle is in the city.
Okay, so the straight question then too is, you are saying, or some of your industry is saying that we don't need any more for now. And then you're saying, well, if we're not going to take 8, we want to have 4. So the way things are right now out there, any individual in a wheelchair or grandma with a cane or whatever, someone calls, we are well protected within the city of Regina for individuals to get a cab.
Well, it's, again, finding, and I don't know if anybody raised this tonight, but finding drivers who are going to provide that service is also a bit of a challenge, and finding the right driver that's going to protect the vehicle investment, because one of the other delegations talked to me, these vehicles are like $60,000 now, so you really want to make sure someone's going to be treating it very, very well, because you don't want to be, if it's damaged, it's more expensive to repair potentially because it may have damaged some of the retrofit on it, or you don't want to be off the road. So that's why the industry's saying, like, let's find a happy medium here. If 4 would certainly be something that the industry could work with. It should help on the user basis, but I really think that all parties around the table meeting and understanding where each person is coming from their perspective, in order to deliver a better service, so that the users, the customers who want the service, are getting the service they need. And right now, there's no real onus on the operator to be providing that.
Okay, so one more to your worship. Am I hearing correctly that you might be having problems of hiring qualified or hiring individuals that will be or be trained or will be willing to be trained and be a good accessible taxi drivers with the sensitivity and all that? Is that
yeah, it's always a challenge to find it's a physically more demanding job than the typical taxi. So you want to find someone who's wants to provide that service, is physically fit, to do it. And you're right, is open to the sensitivity training and willing to work nights and weekends.
Okay. Thank you for
in all kinds of weather.
Thank you for answers. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Fendura. Councilor Flagel.
Thanks, and welcome back. A couple of things. So today, the license would cost $300 and some, right?
Yes.
They cannot sell it next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Right.
So the $150,000 is off the table. But you mentioned that they can lease it. Now, what kind of details can you tell me about leasing that license? So if let me just say this. Let's say tomorrow this all goes through as is. There's 8 new licenses coming on board. There's 400 people lined up outside to buy that license.
Mm-hmm.
And are willing to spend $60,000 for the vehicle and the necessary lifts, etc. Then they turn around and go walk out the street, and there's 17 guys lined up to lease that cab. What are they going to pay to lease that cab?
I don't know.
There's no industry standard? No.
It'll be whatever the two individuals.
Again, it's an individual thing, not a company to company. Regina Capital. Nobody has control over that. Okay. So if that all happens, but does it not in your mind, and the rest of the delegates, in your mind, if there's 8 licenses, and I think last year, if I stand corrected, there was, how many, 6 licenses?
Yes.
And
6
300 and some applicants?
Yeah.
Would we expect more than 300 and some tomorrow?
If there was 8?
If there was 8.
You might expect a little bit more than that, but I mean, it's still a pretty big investment for people who are going to have to find, you know,
Why do you,
$60,000.
let me ask you this then, why do you think there would be that many if the picture that's being painted is kind of doom and gloom for the next 6-8 months for the cab industry until we get more data? When you got 400 people wanting to buy 8 licenses for nothing, 350.
It's a job for their life.
Okay, okay. They have the ability to utilize that cab for regular service and access, right?
Yes.
So I asked, I'm not sure Mr. Van de Kamp understood my question. The markings on this thing, because we talked about this last community protective, people didn't realize that they were even out there. And I think it was maybe even you or somebody, there's no big blue sticker, there's no this, there's no, like in the parking lots, there's no signs. It's in, and does that, do the user groups then think that there's no cabs out there? And the data maybe reflects that. I don't know.
We've kind
I'm asking.
of gone full circle because the original vehicles that we put out were really raised roof, and they were
Right.
kind of, people actually didn't like them because they were a little bit too obvious. So I
Okay.
mean, the ones now are a lot more streamlined looking, but they all carry deckling, you know, probably 8x8 wheelchair accessible
Okay,
deckling.
so they all do?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And if we were able to use bus lanes, we could move through traffic quicker as well in the peak times.
Ah, well, that's something Mr. Onright maybe look at too. But, okay, that's all I had for right now. It's just more, curious about the data, because previous delegation said the city isn't getting the data, the city's not getting the data. We need the data for February, March, and yet the Human Rights is saying the busiest peak is coming up, September through April. I heard you say you would possibly be okay with 4 and maybe 6 later on, and let the 4 run and see how it goes to help maybe fill that niche.
Yes. Yeah.
But does your company work the same as Co-op? And if there's an accessible cab taking a regular fare and an accessible call comes in, it's stopped and diverted?
Yeah, accessible trips take priority, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And if for some reason we can't provide the service for whatever reason, then we would call or direct the customer to call Capital or Co-op or Van Dees to try to get the service. So we
Okay.
You know, so that the customer's taken care of.
I'm not sure if it was last meeting we had, but the prior meeting, there was a delegation that came forward and was at the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning and did not get an accessible cab for whatever, I don't know, do you have any anything why that would happen at 1 o'clock in the morning?
I remember part of that
Yeah, I
meeting
do
as
too,
well. I
and
don't
it was
remember
sort
all the
of just
details on it.
Stuck here.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge sometimes to find, you know, we kind of talked about drivers and find somebody who wants to work in those late night hours when there isn't as much of a demand there for accessible service.
Yeah.
I can't remember the details of that incident.
Yeah, I know, I remember that. Okay, my other question about this, and then just last one, is if the accessible cab is on the street, do they have to have a qualified driver to be the accessible person? Or could somebody, I'm going to just take it out for 6 hours and be on the road, but I don't know how to do accessible, so don't give me that. No.
It's up to each operator, like the lotto winner.
Yeah.
He hires his drivers or leases it out to somebody who hires the drivers and trains them. How they exactly, there isn't the standardized training, let's put it that way.
Okay.
But the provincial government did some work over the last spring and summer trying to develop standardized, kind of a one-stop website where you could go to and gather a lot of information about whether it's, someone who's maybe hard of hearing, someone who's hard of, doesn't have a lot of sight or less mobility, so that it's kind of in a one-stop thing, so that it will help with training, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at the report on the 2015 Accessible Taxicab Lottery. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. Rise to bring forward CR 15-80 and it's the 2015 Accessible Taxicab Lottery recommendations of the Community Protective Services Committee of July 8th, that 8 accessible taxi cab owner licenses be allocated through the lottery system prescribed by the taxi bylaw 1994 and 2015, that CR 14 be moved from the outstanding list for Community and Protective Services Committee. And if I could just...
Perhaps get a seconder for that.
I'll get a seconder.
Councillor Hawkins seconds that. Go
Okay,
ahead.
and I'll wait.
Do you want to close debate?
Yeah.
Okay, close debate. Other speakers on the report? Councillor Burnett's hand first, and then Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question for administration that seems part of the challenge here this evening is sort of the lack of reliable data, and I think that's where a lot of the discrepancy between the parties are, that they're both operating from different sets of data. If tonight we make a decision to add more licenses, what recourse do we have to, let's say once we get data coming in the new year, to pull back licenses or cancel, or do we just wait until, put a moratorium on and freeze the allocation of licenses until the demand catches up to the supply? Do we have any recourse? I'm just saying, like say, we've got to make a choice tonight in the decision, and I'd like to make the best one.
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Your Worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Lai.
Through you, Your Worship, once we meet the mandated ratio that's in the bylaw currently, that is the 1 for every 11,000, the administration would be able to use the data to determine future number of licenses. So that has been the plan, that this population ratio would be interim and that we would use the data going forward to issue more licenses. So if we looked at the data and we saw that the supply and demand was okay to meet the needs of the population, then we would either issue more licenses or we would stop issuing licenses depending on what that data tells us.
But we have no recourse right now to remove what I guess we can describe the lifetime license.
Through the chair, no, we don't at this time have the ability to revoke it unless there's been some way that a person has violated some provision in the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Price?
Thank you. I'd like to know what kind of impact the ride services give, like, I don't really want to mention names, but there's a couple of ride services for that are accessible out there. And does that have an impact on that? And how do we regulate that, or do we, how are we ensuring that they are providing safe rides to the residents of Regina who have special needs as well?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, I'll defer that again to Ms. Lai.
Through you, Your Worship, the city does not regulate any of the other accessible shuttles that are not metered taxis. Those are regulated by SGI. The shuttle operator would still have to follow any requirements through SGI.
Okay, I guess I'll leave that at that. Do we not have the authority, just like we did with the other licenses that we're recalling after the year or after the season's over, do we not have the ability when we do the decision tonight to actually decide how long those licenses could be? We could say these are good for a year and kind of see how it goes after we get the data in. Do we have that ability?
Ms. Lai?
Through you, Your Worship, currently in the bylaw it says that it is a license that will be good for as long as the person wants to hold it. We would have to change the bylaw if we wanted to say that the license would only be allocated for a certain period of time.
Do we have the ability to say that these licenses are non-leasable?
Ms. Lai?
Through you, Your Worship, we do not regulate what the lease rates are. That is something that is managed between the broker and the vehicle owner. So we don't currently regulate any aspect of that in our bylaw.
So are you saying that, no, we don't have the ability to say once somebody has this license that they cannot lease it to somebody else? Is that what I'm hearing?
Through Your Worship, I believe that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I do have concerns with this, especially when I hear that accessible, the taxis that we have now are doing an average of 2 rides per day. That does concern me, but I also understand the part that you can actually do other rides in between. So I have mixed feelings about this because I think if I had my way, they'd all be accessible, so that would be fantastic. But obviously, for an input of $60,000 extra to add in, it almost balances out that dollar amount that you would buy a regular taxi license for, in my mind. But I do have concerns about this, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. My first question is the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that you've mentioned in the report. Could you just give us briefly a summary of who sits on that committee besides the Human Rights Commission in the City of Regina?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Chair, these are people out of the users that represent or have representation on the committee.
Okay. So there aren't any members of the taxi industry on that Stakeholder Advisory Committee?
Mr. Onright?
No, there are not.
Okay. I heard a couple of people speak to the fact that they'd like to see a meeting between the stakeholders and the city and the users. Have we ever had a meeting like that? Are we considering one like that?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, on any major changes or issues that are brought forward, the brokers are consulted with.
Okay, but there isn't a meeting of all of them so that they talk about how can we improve the service for everybody?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, no, there is
Okay.
not.
And then my last question is, 2 people spoke in favor of option 1. And is the only reason option 1 is not feasible is because of the extra added administrative costs that the city has to incur in order to hold 2 lotteries?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, your worship, option 2 was recommended mainly because the information that came back from consulting with the 2 different committees, they recommended that the 8 be brought forward to accelerate the program because the user groups did indicate that there is a need in the community to have more accessible taxi service available to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we should focus a bit on what's being asked here. We're being asked to issue 8 more accessible licenses. We know that a regular license is valued at $350 plus the car. We know at the end of the day that license turns into a piece of paper that sells for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we know that there's a great deal of value in that piece of paper. That value can only come from one place, and that is from the demand of the public for taxi services. Given that, I have a hard time saying no to issuing 8 more licenses, which I do not think will bring the industry to its knees, when I know that those 8 more licenses are going to help people who are physically challenged get a ride in a reasonable time. So for that reason, because I'm satisfied that the industry can handle this, because I'm satisfied that there's a great deal of money to be made with these licenses, and because I want to help those who are physically challenged, I'm going to support the administration's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I ask a question first to the administration. We have a current bylaw, and the bylaw has a quota in it. Can I ask when we made that public and when we had those public discussions about that number and the number of accessible taxis? How long ago was that, please?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Lai.
Ms. Lai?
Through you, Your Worship, the council approved the population ratio last February, and about 6 months leading up to that decision, we consulted with our various stakeholder groups to determine that population ratio as well.
So that was a very public number at some point in time, and has been out there for some time. The difference that I understand today is that it's in terms of the review, and therefore the recommendation is simply an acceleration of the number. Is that correct? But the number has not changed.
Ms. Lai?
Through you, Your Worship, no, that number has not changed. It's still 18, which is based on the population ratio of 1 for every 11,000 residents.
Okay. And again, to follow up in terms of the future, so would you see that the trip data and population would come into effect as to whether or not there are more taxi licenses of any kind brought in or not?
Ms. Lai?
Through Your Worship, I believe that's correct.
Thank you. When we do consultations and we look at best practice, do we not consult with other cities to see what their practice is and compare that to us, whether it is taxis or other things?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, we do, and we did with the city of Saskatoon.
Right. And so the number that we are suggesting, is that consistent with what Saskatoon or other cities would do based on population and trip data?
Through Your Worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Lai.
Ms. Lai?
Through you, Your Worship, that is what we're seeing other jurisdictions doing as well, that they are looking at population ratios as an interim measure and then using trip data to determine the number of licenses going forward.
Thanks very much. I was quite taken by the specifics that were mentioned by Co-op Taxi in terms of how they have gone about advertising to make sure that people know Facebook and et cetera. My first question is, does the city have a role to play in advertising for accessible taxis beyond what they do and deference to paratransit?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Your Worship, city administration through paratransit currently gets information out to the user groups through the various committees. So the Accessibility Advisory Committee, the Transportation Advisory Committee, and also paratransit did put together a brochure and has done some open houses through trade shows and so forth.
Perfect. So I know that was referenced by one of the delegations. I appreciate the comment. So we are taking an active role to make sure that people know the service exists in the city and that it is an enhancement of paratransit. Would that be accurate?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, that is correct.
Thank you. Have we given some consideration to using accessible taxis to supplement the services of paratransit?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, in the current year, we are doing that. There would have to be a budget request going forward in 2016 to be able to do that further. That is under review right now because of the 2 additional paratransit buses coming on board in 2016.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think that we have a bylaw. So for me to defer from the bylaw means we need to change the bylaw. Second thing is I want to point out is we did an awful lot of public consultations when we looked at the whole taxi industry. It's why I identified with one of the delegations that we looked at cameras, that we looked at all sorts of safety measures, and we tried to do a number of things. This, to me, is a continuation of those things. I'll be supporting the 8.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Fundura.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to take off on Councillor O'Donnell's question on, can I get an answer or a comment as transit, conventional transit, as moving to the future? Is there a discussion or is something in works that transit is going to be hopefully using taxis or accessible taxis to help in providing service to our citizens? Or am I grasping on something that I'm trying to figure out if going to the future, is that something that's going to be as a norm where we could use accessible taxis to help with paratransit on the conventional and paratransit?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, For paratransit, we are currently doing that. For conventional transit, to the best of my knowledge, that is not being considered at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fundura. Other speakers? Before I have Councillor Flagel close debate. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Just a few questions, and I guess a couple of them state, do we have any vacant licenses today
Mr. Onright?
that we've already issued?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Lai.
Ms. Lai?
Through your worship, to my knowledge, there aren't any vacant ones.
If this goes forward today, how long, because of the expense, $60,000, including the vehicle, of course, how long do we give them to put those 8 vehicles on the road?
Ms. Lai?
Through your worship, we give them a month to put the vehicles on the road.
Okay, good. Okay, that. So $60,000 to do it. Now, the reference has been made a lot of times by delegations about the data. Why hasn't the data not been brought forward? Or are we still compiling it, or where are we at with that?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, it is not compulsory till the end of 2015, so we do not have all of the data. We don't have all of the companies reporting full data as of yet, but as of December of 2015, that will become compulsory.
So we're waiting for the companies to give us the data, and they don't have it yet.
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, we are receiving some. We are not receiving all of it.
Is that just because they're collecting it, or they're just not giving it to us, or they're evasive, or where are we at with this?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Lai.
Ms. Lai?
Through your worship, one of the companies is providing us with the data. It's something that they started doing because they were collecting all of their electronic trip data and reporting it to us. The other 2 have not provided us reasons why they're not providing their data, and at the same time, it's not mandatory that they provide it at this time.
Oh, it's okay. That was my other question. Okay, it's not. So, the one thing we talked about was revoking. You mentioned that it's a lifetime. There's no way they're going to ever lose it. But if they stop taking an accessible ride, just because maybe the driver's not trained, can we pull that back on a situation like that where it's being used under a false pretense?
Ms. Lai?
Through your worship, yes, the license inspector would have the ability to revoke a license if we found that the license owner did not meet the requirements of the bylaw, and those would include things like the driver not being properly trained to use the vehicle in a safe manner, or that we find that the brokerages are not prioritizing the accessible trips, or there are a number of other things in the bylaw that you could revoke a license based on, and that would be things like if they were not providing accessible trips for a period of 8 weeks or more, then we would be able to revoke the license for that reason as well.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, that helps too, but, whoops, sorry. I guess we were hearing 2 sides. Obviously, the industry says that we've got adequate, and the user groups are saying we don't have enough. What impact, the way we've done our transit system has become so much better. We have 104 low-flow buses. The impact, and the human rights people were saying that, the demand isn't so high in the summertime. Is that partly because they can utilize the low-floor buses? And maybe that's another reason why we're a bit different than Saskatoon?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, yes, low-floor buses definitely help with the service. However, in the winter months, not as easy for people that require a low-floor bus or paratransit, because of the snow and getting to the transit stops is not as easy as it is in the summertime.
Okay. Sitting with the chair of this, I would like to bring an amendment forward on changing this up a little bit and amending it to going to 4, which would then start roughly within a month. Run that through till we get all the data that we required and said we're going to get by the end of February, March. Look at the data, and by May of next year, we should know if we need another 4, 6, 8, and then that way we kind of appease both sides for a while, and then that way we're not putting 6 or 8 other people on the hook for 60 grand, and maybe justifiably not needed, because like you just finished telling me, the transit system takes away a lot of the summer demand on the accessible cabs.
Councillor Flego, just a moment, if you've got an amendment,
Yeah,
we
I'm
need
just
a seconder for it before you can
Sure.
explain. I want a
Okay,
seconder
I'm
for
sorry.
the amendment,
That's what I'm looking for
which
is-
is 4 and then 4.
4 and then 6.
4 and then 6.
Yeah, 4 and then 6 after we collect the data in probably May.
So before we explain it, I need a seconder for the amendment.
If I could get someone to second that?
Second.
Your Worship, I'll second it to get it onto the floor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And this way, we've got the data by April, May to justify if we need 4 or 6 more. And the number can be whatever it needs to be, because right now, if we put 14, we have 10, if we add 14 more, our number per person is 14,000. Saskatoon's average is 11,000, and we're being told that that's probably too many from what some of the people are telling us. So if I take a population of 200,000, divided into 14, I come up with, divided into 14, I get 14,000 per person. That's not right. Anyway, but it does seem like it. So is that a possibility that the administration could work with something like that?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, just for clarification, it is 1 in 11,000. And in terms of how quick the individual will be able to get a unit on the ground, once going through the lottery process and acquiring a vehicle, we anticipate it would be somewhere around October before the units would actually be in service.
Well, that would even be better, because then it would be the winter months when they need the demand. So that's a possibility as well. So I just think that maybe we're jumping.
Okay.
My thought on this is maybe 8 is too many when we don't have all the data in place yet. But we need to appease them. So
Okay, good. So we'll have,
Okay.
on the amendment, speakers to the amendment. We have Councilor Murray?
Just a clarification, so we've got 4, and then you said 4 or 6. So right now, we have a recommendation of only 8. So what's the rationale for the additional 2 more, making up the 6?
I think just to make sure that if we needed the 6 with the data, then we could
Councilor
justify
Flego, you
it.
can see the amendment in front of you. It's also on the screen in front of you up
it's-
here.
yeah.
So it
Sorry.
said 4 accessible taxi cab owners licenses be issued immediately, and 6 additional accessible taxi cab owners licenses be issued in May 2016, subject to review of the trip data at the end of March 2016.
Can I ask for a friendly amendment on there just to remove the number 6? Because we don't know what that number is. When the data comes in, it could be 6, it could be 5, it could be 4. But maybe just that additional cabs that we determine at that time.
You okay with that? Okay.
So 4 now, and then once
Additional.
we have the data,
Okay.
additional cabs. So just have
Okay.
additional.
So on
Thank
the
you.
amendment, other speakers? Councilor O'Donnell?
Mine is just simply a process question. Well, there's an amendment on the table. What does that mean for the bylaw? And what would that do? Does that mean the bylaw would have to be amended later?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Lai.
Ms. Lai?
Through your worship, the only concern right now would be that it looks like with this recommendation or with this amendment that we would no longer be relying on the population ratio. We would be going straight to the trip data at the end of March to make our decisions based on the number or on to determine the number of licenses that we'd be issuing going forward. So we aren't really using the population ratio anymore.
Councilor O'Donnell?
I understand the answer. I appreciate that. That's not really what my question was.
You have to amend the bylaw too if
Yeah,
it makes
so-
this change. Do we need to amend the bylaw to, if we adopted this recommendation?
Because we're now deviating both on number and on process.
Right. John Wright?
Through your worship, I believe we would.
And we can do that separately from this, I take it.
Well, if we pass this, we'll have to refer the bylaw back. To the city solicitor, any comments on this?
Yes, Your Worship. I mean, the reference to the accessible taxi cab owner licenses is in section 20 sub 4, and it does talk about the ability of a license inspector to issue additional accessible cab licenses. Really sets a cap on that so that licenses beyond one for every 11,000 residents is the cap that's currently in the bylaw. That's at 20 sub 4. So if we are, as Ms. Lai has said, deviating from the formula that's currently in the bylaw, then we would need to make an amendment to the bylaw.
If there's no other speakers for a moment, I have a question on process, and I want to refer members to page 5 of the report, where it speaks of issuing 4 accessible licenses in 2015 and the remainder in 2016. This is very close to the amendment that we have before us, and there's no reference to a change of bylaw in that report. So I'm wondering what it is that we need to amend if we're very close to the option number 1. I don't see it saying we need to amend the bylaw to do that. We still would be relying on the ratio, and at some point we're going to have to use the trip data and move away from that solely as a source of what the number should be. So just a question to the solicitor.
Your Worship, so it's clear, if we are moving to using the trip data as the basis for allocating licenses, that's where there would need to be an amendment to the bylaw.
Members are clear? Councillor Hawkins. To the amendment.
I would like to speak to the amendment.
Yes.
I don't think that we should be restructuring the criteria for issuing licenses on the council floor in a one-off situation like this. The administration has brought forward a proposal based on the current criteria of 8. To reject that proposal in favor of 4 plus some nebulous number based on trip data, I think undermines the integrity of the whole bylaw system where the criteria are clearly set out. I think it's dangerous for us to do this kind of tinkering à l'improviste on council floor. But I think it's especially dangerous to do it on the backs of people who are physically challenged. Because what this means is those people who have come before us and said there's a shortage, supported by the Human Rights Commission, are going to find themselves not with the number 8 recommended, but with the number 4 and maybe more, maybe who knows. I don't think that whatever clarity will be gained by the trip data, which I suspect won't change matters very much, whatever clarity will be gotten by waiting a few extra months for that, overrides the criteria that are in the bylaw that are tried and tested, overrides the recommendation of the Human Rights Commission, and overrides, frankly, the needs of physically challenged people. I think we should adopt the recommendation of the administration and therefore reject this amendment in order to forward the interests of the people I've mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers to the amendment? So we're clear on the amendment. I'll call the question on the amendment. It's up on the screen. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? Motion is defeated. So we'll go back to the recommendation that's on the report, which is, you get that back up on the screen. It is 8 accessible taxi cab owners' licenses be allocated through the lottery system as prescribed under the taxi bylaw 1994 in 2015. We've all spoken to the main amendment. The main motion, I should say. So I'm going to call the question on that report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. We will now move on to other delegations related to the International Trade Center. Mark Allen, Marty Seymour, John Lee, and Tracy Fallman, please come forward. If you could identify yourselves and tell us who you represent. You collectively, as you're here, as one delegation, have 5 minutes for presentation. And of course, there may be questions of members of council afterwards.
Thank you and good evening. Our delegation is pleased to be here tonight to speak in support of this item before council. This is yet another new exciting development opportunity at Evraz Place and the City of Regina. Our delegation includes Mr. Marty Seymour, CEO of Canadian Western Agribition, Mr. John Lee, the CEO of the Regina Regional Opportunities Corporation, and Ms. Tracy Fallman, the CEO of the Regina Hotels Association. And I'm Mark Allen, President and CEO of the Regina Exhibition Association, the operator of Evraz Place for the City of Regina. Together, our organizations have invested time and or financial resources to be actively working with the City Administration and City Council for over 3 years to come to grips with the serious infrastructure issues on the west side of Evraz Place that have made it very difficult for a range of clients to operate, but most significantly impacted has been Canadian Western Agribition and their livestock exhibitors. Our forward-thinking solution has its roots in the 2007 Evraz Place Master Plan, which envisioned the removal of 13 old buildings that are no longer acceptable for event use and replacing them with the proposed International Trade Center. The International Trade Center will do much more than provide world-class facilities for agribition each year. The Evraz Place business plan for the International Trade Center envisions a busy, multi-use facility that will do a range of things, including connect our facilities from east to west all under one roof, provide a large programmable corridor and large foyer that will be a critical link between two current facilities, the AgEx Pavilion and the Canada Centre. It will feature one large multi-purpose space that can be subdivided into 2 or 3 smaller spaces, and it will have high functionality for large trade and consumer shows. It will also have high functionality for large catered events, the ones that you've seen perhaps in the Credit Union Eventplex in recent years. It will take some of the event pressure off our existing sport and recreation facilities that will provide for more sport and rec use in those facilities. It will also provide some additional parking on the site due to the demolition aspect of the project. About 13 buildings will be removed. This will create an exciting new indoor exhibit hall for our show, Canada's Farm Progress Show, while creating an uninterrupted show footprint with much improved traffic flow throughout the property. And finally, a much improved sense of arrival and visual impression of Regina and Evraz Place from our main entrance on the high-volume Louvain Drive. For John and the Regina Regional Opportunities Corporation, this initiative enhances the quality, size, and diversity of venues available to contribute to both economic development and tourism in the city. The International Trade Center name adds to the brand or first impression of Regina and Evraz Place, and this project aligns and supports a key strategic direction that uses events to drive tourism and investment in Regina. And for Tracy and the Regina Hotels Association, the Trade Center provides new opportunities to preserve and enhance the substantial existing business of Canadian Western Agribition and the Farm Show, as well as drive new visitation, overnight stays, and hotel spending. And lastly, and most importantly, for Canadian Western Agribition, they are a local non-for-profit organization and have operated in Regina for 45 years. Their volunteer base is here, and they're proud to call Regina home. Agribition hosts over 125,000 guests from over 70 countries on an annual basis. The success of their show as an international marketplace has helped to put Regina on the map as an agriculture center of excellence. They are proud to be part of Regina's identity, as well as one of the city's active economic engines, contributing over $37 million of economic activity each and every year. The show has been experiencing significant growth in the last 5 years, and the development of the International Trade Center will allow our event to continue to expand and develop the livestock component of their show, but also create a platform to allow them to expand to the festive part of the show. The proposed design offers improvements in people flow, animal movement, exhibitor experience, paving the way to help the show take advantage of our new musical programming, food pavilion, and ever-popular rodeo. In closing, this project will become a unique venue for the country and serve the city well to attract other larger regional and national events. want to thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of this initiative, and our delegation would be pleased to answer any of the questions you have at this time.
Thank you very much. You're just on time. That's great. Thank you very much. We do have questions from members of council. We'll start with Councillor Hinks.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation, and it's great to see all of you up there as a team. I'm looking forward to seeing this come to a completion. As you know, I spent 10 years in the exhibition board myself, so I have a real soft spot for it. But I do have one question, because I hear people talking about this is all about 4 or 5 days of the year. And I know different, you know different, and just because we're on TV right now, if you could explain about the multi-purpose part of it and what kind of events and sports and everything that can be done in this building.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, through your worship, thank you for the question, Councillor Hinks. As with most facilities on the property, this International Trade Center concept is actually a fairly simple design. A large programmable corridor, large open spaces, high ceilings. We got some back-of-house services that will work as a cattle wash rack for agribition, but it'll also be storage area for the rest of the year. There's also some food service capability in the building to support the large catered functions. So aside from Canadian Western Agribition once a year and the farm show, Canada's Farm Progress Show once a year, we envision it to be very busy. There's significant pent-up demand on our large catered functions. Increasingly, we found more and more use for them. And that's aside from even the recent evacuee program, where we would have another option in another year if there was ever so much misfortune as they had in the north. So these spaces will work for large catered functions. It'll also work for large trade and consumer shows. And what I especially like about it is the way it connects our complex from east to west to the other facilities and services that are available on the property. And we have found that every time we've made a move like this with this kind of thinking, that we've continued to find actually more uses than we ever contemplated at the start. And that was true with the Eventplex, and it's been true with the Cooperator Center. And I think if the past is any indication of the future, we'll find other uses that we aren't envisioning. There are some shows that we've lost. The Saskatchewan Snowmobile Show is one, for example. And so our staff have worked with the industry. The Spring Home and Garden Show is also another organization that's been suffering in poor conditions for a long time and have a growing event. So we have some existing business and we have some new. Our current thinking on sport and recreation, these large spaces could work for that as well. And it may especially work when we're attracting major bids for regional tournaments, that type of thing. However, our main line of thinking is that we'll devote the sport and rec use first and foremost to existing sport and rec facilities, and then use this new facility for overflow. So I think by the simple design and layout and connectivity, we have a wide range of options that will ensure that the utilization rates are there for that facility.
Councillor Hinks?
Thank you, and I do want to congratulate you on hosting our people from the north when they were in so much trouble. That was wonderful, the way you stepped up to the plate and looked after it. I've heard lots of great comments about it. Another, being multi-purpose, say if we were to have a chance to host a major soccer tournament, would this building could it be converted into a soccer facility too?
Mr. Allen?
Yes, I mean with soccer, as you know, the indoor specs are still not really clear for large soccer, but certainly for smaller, like a regional tournament with younger people, the new facility could work for that. Although we really prefer it. We have the big turf investment over $1 million a couple of years ago in the Eventplex, and so our first priority would probably be to use that facility and that turf in that building for those types of things.
I guess this might be a question for others there, but the Hotel Association, like, what do you see for it with this new complex? And I guess to Mr. Lee, what kind of economic development or economic impact do you think it'll have in Regina? So if both of you could speak on that.
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. We commend city administration, and this has been an amazing journey over the last 3 years with having a problem and coming up with a solution, the International Trade Center. We truly believe that it will strengthen our city as a convention and consumer show destination. It's a highly, highly competitive area in terms of attracting international or national, that type of business to our city. We're competing with cities across Canada, such as Winnipeg, Ottawa, I believe Niagara Falls. There's quite a few of them anyways, that have built new convention centers themselves. And it creates, not just on the tourism side of things, but the economic impact is immense with that type of business and that type of spend that comes in, supporting more than just hotels. Absolutely, hotels do benefit from that business. But you also bring in your taxis. They're paying, these people that are coming in are paying airport fees. They're eating in our restaurants. They're shopping in retail. So it has quite the impact, and this development will definitely strengthen our ability to be able to bring that type of business to our city.
Mr. Lee, do you want to add to that?
Just a couple of comments, Your Worship. The event and convention business is a multi-billion-dollar industry in Canada. As you're aware, through your Economic Development Agency, we've actually identified events, convention, and trade shows as a sector within the region, because it's actually one of the key ways as a community we can attract new investment and visitors to our city. While there's opportunities in the sport and cultural area, I think the real opportunity with the new trade center coupled with the stadium and the rest of the corridor will be our ability to diversify into other trade show sectors in agriculture, but also in some of our other key sectors such as energy and manufacturing in particular. So the exciting opportunity we see is the fact that what's the next agribusiness or next farm progress show in other sectors that as a result of having this facility here is going to create huge opportunities and give us a competitive edge from other communities. And I think that's the real opportunity here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hinks?
Yeah, I don't want to leave the cowboy out here, so...
Is there a cowboy here?
Yeah, he's a bronc rider, calf roper. To Mr. Seymour, how will this enhance the agribition? Like, do you see growth coming from this, or will it just stay what it is and be successful? Or like just give me a picture of what it's going to be like for...
Sure. Mr. Seymour?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we see lots of opportunity with this. I mean, if you look at the infrastructure that's there, it's a hodgepodge of small compartmentalized buildings, and this will allow us to move people, in particular animals. It deals with some safety issues. But I'd say we're in a huge growth phase right now. The festive piece of what we are reaching out into the community through our food pavilion and trying to connect both urban and rural interests on this one. And so this property, in our business, we compete against other provinces, but also the northern states as well. And I think this puts Regina on the map here. We're centralizing the continent to allow us to attract more people, more exhibitors. 30% of our cattle come from Alberta now. I don't know why we can't have them all. So from my standpoint, huge growth opportunity for the show, and we'll build on this momentum. And I agree with my colleagues here. We did this together because we do see event attraction as an opportunity for the community, too. This is more than just agribition. Everyone's going to win on this one.
Thank you. I've over the years of being involved in the exhibition board, this wash rack has been a sore point all the way. Are you going to get what you want this time?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Thank you.
A wash rack. Let's write that down. That's good. Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your time and your presentation. So we've already heard from the province and the federal government about contribution. The motion here tonight clearly lays out that the maximum amount of funding provided would not exceed $11 million. So I assume there's a firm business plan in place, but two questions. Number one is how much cushion is built into that business plan? How risky is it? And number two is, some of the factors involved are really out of our hands. It's sort of the broader economy and the price of, cement or steel or what have you. Who carries that risk is the second question. So let's suppose that your grand total, 38.4 or whatever it is, if the price goes over, whose risk is it? Thanks.
Mr. Allen?
I think the information before council addresses that in part, in that those terms and conditions under which we're going to operate and execute the construction project are yet to be determined. So that'll be due diligence that will happen following this. I would like to point out, though, that in our two previous projects that we've completed, working with the three levels of government and other funding, one $13 million project and one $66, that we've been able to demonstrate on time and on budget performance, as well as a sustainable business plan for those facilities. And so, we will be looking to consult with the city regarding the risk that we take on in that and the risk the city takes on. However, I think we all know that in the end, it's up to the Regina Exhibition Association Limited to make sure that the city's risk is minimized through the proper, prudent management of the contracts.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was present for the press release, and I was amazed at the inside of the building and the fact that there are tarps hung so that rain doesn't fall on you while you're standing in the building. So I guess one of my questions for you, Mr. Allen, is how is the building used now, or is it used now, and what's the lifespan left in that building?
We did a study to answer that exact question. I think my first 2 or 3 years in charge there, so back maybe 04, 05, something like that, where we had an independent assessment of the facilities. It really said they're pretty much all past due, and it also commented that as soon as we get into renos in those buildings of any significance, we run into a lot of code issues. You've been dealing with issues of accessibility for transportation today, but most of our older buildings are inaccessible to meet current standards, fire code, et cetera. So, our decision was taken back in 2007 when we took that information and we looked at our master plan, and we really said, let's move as quickly as we can to demolish those buildings and replace it with something new.
Okay, thank you. And a comment was made that there's a team standing up there, and that it's wonderful to see that many organizations working as a team. But there's 3 levels of government that are also going to be part of this. Could you just comment on the depth and the time that it takes to get something like this in place?
Yes, well, we're privileged. I think one of our advantages in Regina, and I'm biased, is that we work together. And where there's differences, we air them out, but we usually find a way to reach out for the greater good. And certainly we've had lots of help. Marty has spent a lot of time putting together the value proposition of Canadian Western Agribition for the community. In many ways, it's easier to be seen to be raising money for a brand new venture rather than raising money to preserve a venture that's been here for a very long time that people may take for granted. I think the people that are up here all recognize, myself included, that the last thing we wanted was your first call to be that Agribition was leaving town. Our message was heard loud and clear. His Worship, Mayor Fougere, the Minister Lyle Stewart, who made the announcement on last week on Friday, I guess it was, and Minister Ritz have all heard loud and clear. And we've been very, very fortunate in this community, and certainly in my time at Everast Place, to see a high level of cooperation between all 3 levels of government for a common cause and the greater good in our view. So it's been a very long journey. For me, it's been pretty much 12 years, and but in a diligent way, there's been a whole range of people, including the city administration, who've had their sleeves rolled up, a number of the people that are here tonight, for well over 2-3 years on this file. I think the thing that I like about where we're at is that this has been done with a lot of thought, collaboration, and consideration, and I think the strength of a multi-purpose project is it can attract a lot of different uses, and a lot of different agendas. At the same time, we have to make sure that we're balancing those agendas correctly and make sure that we keep as many people happy as we can. But when I look at the beautiful $278 million new stadium that's coming onto the property and what it's going to do for the southeast and east side of the grounds, this will balance it off with the west side looking equally, maybe not quite as rich, but certainly equally as attractive and inviting as an entrance for people that are attending the new stadium as well as other events on the property. So we're really pleased to see that we're going to show ourselves off to advantage in the future.
And then I have one last question. This building, as well as all the other buildings, will be bringing people in from outside the city, and it's good for the economic advantages for the city. But there are also things that people who live in Regina and the children who live in Regina will be able to benefit from, and I think that's something that we have to stress. For instance, I think I read somewhere, and you can tell me whether I did or whether I dreamed it, that there's going to be some children's sports groups that don't have places to practice their sports that may be able to use some of the space in these new buildings.
Certainly, with our sport and rec facilities specifically have exceeded, I think, our expectations. I think collectively of what they might do and their utilization. The rinks, for example, we've added extra capacity for ice making because originally we contemplated 2 summer sheets of ice, and we're now, I think today 4, and we'll be 5 right after the fair. So the utilization and interest in the sport facilities is very high, particularly weekday evenings and weekends. There is available time and space during the day for other groups, and as well, we've had pressure on those same facilities for events. So adding the International Trade Center will free up some of the pressure on the availability of these facilities, and certainly we have a high interest, especially with the inner city, North Central community particularly, that we would like to be able to give back. So we're always looking for an opportunity to do that.
Okay. And then I just close with, we have a mantra here, on budget, on time. So I look forward to how that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Flakel.
Thanks, and welcome, and congratulations. I'll say the 4 of you, but there's hundreds. But I, too, was at the official opening, and I looked up at the roof, and I thought Spider-Man was up there spinning a web, but realized it's those $10 tarps. The new is going to be on the website where? For people to see the great plan. Where can people go look at it on the web?
Yeah, the new design that's been provided to council is actually on Evraz Place website, evrazplace.com.
Okay, good. Just so we know that, because there's people out there that I'm sure saw it in the paper, and they're always looking. So, in any time you're doing reconstruction, demolition, what kind of disruptions are we looking at for 215 Farm Show, 216 Farm Show, Agribition, Fair. There's six major events going to be coming forward. I understand if all goes forward, you're not going to start construction until after Agribition of this year. So there's 6 huge events happening in the next 2 years. How are you going to handle the disruptions?
Yeah, the construction timeline is based on the current concept and information we have so far is a 2-year build. So with construction beginning right after Agribition this year, December 2015, call it 2016 year 1. Definitely 2016 will be a year of inconvenience for some of the bigger shows, particularly Agribition. I don't believe that we're going to end up, and this is not a decision, but we're looking at perhaps not knocking down all the buildings all at once, that some buildings would be, some of the buildings slated for demolition would have one more year in 2016, and we use a combination of the partially built new facility as well as some of the existing in 2016, and then complete the job in 2017. For Farm Show, it's already inconvenienced with a footprint that's cut in half by the old facilities, so we'll find a way to make our way through there. It'll be a year of adjustment. But in many ways, it's the same kind of thing as you deal with your road construction program in the summer here, that our constituents know and understand when there's, in fact, maybe even better than the ordinary taxpayer understanding about roads. I think most of these stakeholders all know and understand that some short-term pain for some long-term benefit is certainly something worth doing. We're pretty good at adapting, and so is Agribition, the farm show. Summer fair, it won't be as effective because that area is not programmed for summer fair at the present time. So I would see 2015 as, or 2016 as adjustment year. But I think we're going to be able to have Agribition in there by 2017. The farm show might have 2 years of disruption in all of this. But overall, it's something, as most of you know, the farm show is our own show produced by Everard's Place. And we have lots of ways of working around those things. And quite frankly, it'll be a dream compared to working in those old substandard buildings. I can hear the thunder and rain crashing around right now, and if there was an event happening in those buildings right now, it would not be pretty. So really the construction's a minor inconvenience compared to what we've been dealing with.
So one other question regarding the complex. The Canada Centre building, I know you've said has roofing issues. Is that going to be looked after in this phase of the building, developing, and the new?
Your Worship, the Canada Centre roof issue was dealt with 2 years ago, so it's got a brand new roof.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was all done.
Yeah, that's the Canada Centre. The building you were in the other day was the Winter Fair building.
Winter Fair.
That's where you saw our beautiful
I'm sorry,
tarps.
yes. Yeah, Winter Fair. Yeah, Canada Centre. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flanagan. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome, everyone. It's good to see everybody together, and kind of, I think, a very positive announcement. I guess I'm already thinking next steps after the building's built, and I like the line in your presentation where you talked about the business plan envisioned a very busy multi-use. And I guess I'm just thinking that I'm not sure if the other organizations have been thinking, do we have the existing capacity now in hotel rooms, restaurants, transportation, challenges? Are we starting to think ahead in terms of how many more rooms we need and how many more restaurants we may need once this is very successful? And maybe if there are some challenges, if you could maybe just share that for me.
Ms. Feldman?
Through you, Your Worship. This International Trade Center, I mentioned earlier, will strengthen our city as an event destination, and it's an exciting development. And when you're looking at development from a hotel perspective, you're looking for those things that are that show growth and sustainability. Last year, we had 350 more rooms open up in our city, and before the end of this year, we'll have another 250. And we've got about another 750 prospecting right now. And that's been a huge growth. And these developers are showing confidence in our community, in the city of Regina, in terms, and they do rely on tourism. They do rely on that tourism business, and this will definitely help.
Are there any barriers that have kind of been identified? Not barriers, but issues that we still have to need to address in terms, like, when I think of major events, there's, let's say, 10,000 people maybe in the city that we have to move around and shuttle. They all want to go for supper. They all want to go. Do we have that kind of capacity? Are we thinking ahead, thinking about how we handle that kind of volume?
Through you, Your Worship. One of the obstacles that that we have discussed, and it has been discussed amongst the partners that are here today as well, is the need for a citywide event transportation strategy, is bringing delegates or participants to sporting events to and from hotels and Everest Place. And that is something that has been, it hasn't been addressed yet, but it has been noted. And I know a number of parties are now starting to talk about it and are fully looking at coming together, hopefully similar to the party you see before you, to come up with a solution to that obstacle.
Appreciate that. My question wasn't to be taken in a negative connotation. It was from a very positive, that these are good challenges to have in my mind. So yes. I do see this as a driver for a lot more investment. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. So if I could, I'd like to begin with the lady. So I appreciate your comment about the number of hotel rooms and so on. Can I just get you to expand on those numbers again? I missed what you said initially, so if you would tell me that first. The number of rooms that are expected or hotels in the next fall.
Absolutely.
Ms. Fallman?
Through you, Your Worship. Last year, we had 350 hotel rooms open up in the city of Regina. And this year, before the end of the year, we'll have another 250. We do have that are right now being constructed. We'll probably have another possibly 200 open the following year, and that'll leave about 500 rooms, and which is about, I would say there's about 10 different hotels right now that are prospecting in our city and are looking at investment opportunities.
Thanks very much. When you as a group are looking at an event coming to our city, do you look at the surrounding areas being part of that as well? So do you consider perhaps a hotel room at White City or Moose Jaw or whatever?
Through you, Your Worship. Depending on the size of the event, absolutely, we will. When you look at events, I'll use the 2013 Juno Awards as an example. Our city did an amazing job in hosting it and accommodating that event. But we were able to join forces with Moose Jaw, for example, to share various aspects of that event, as well as the accommodations side of things.
Good. Thanks very much. I'll ask Mr. Seymour a question if I could. So reference was made to about having everything under one roof. Can you tell me why that's important to you?
Mr. Seymour?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Well, in our business, it's really important because in November, you never know what the weather's going to be. And, and I really think that's a distinct advantage of this city and this property, is all under one roof. When you're looking at 6 months of moderate weather, unpredictable weather, that's a big drawing card for event attraction.
Good. Thanks very much. So as an organization, while you organize Agribition, and it's a huge undertaking, have you ever thought, or do you look at other dates that as an organization you may wish to do something that I will call supplemental or in addition to?
And through Your Worship. Yeah, we have explored that most recently, Councillor, and part of it is that as the organization matures and expands, things are vibrant now as we're looking for other opportunities. Part of what we recognize is we have this great venue here with this new property is maybe we can help fill some programming gaps. We're not committed to anything right now, but you can imagine in agriculture, which would be sort of our area of expertise, global interest in trade. That's why both levels of government are here at the federal and provincial level. We might have a role to play in that. We're going to continue to explore those and treat it on a case-by-case basis.
Good. I thank you very much. Mr. Lee, it seems to me that I've heard more about big events in the last while than events. Is there a trend that's happening out there to have larger conventions and therefore a need for bigger, stronger facilities?
Mr. Lee?
Your Worship, I think that's fair to say, and becoming extremely more competitive throughout Canada with other urban cities. And I think Mark may not agree with this, but this is probably the last key to the puzzle in terms of that corridor. And I think this will actually distinguish our city from majority of other urban cities in the country in terms of our ability to attract both small and large events, but in particular the larger events that will have a significant impact. So,
I remember from the World Juniors a comment made that there was no other place that had all of the rinks under one roof.
Right.
Well, it seems now the roof has been extended even farther. So when you look at trade offerings or when you look at trade shows, do you see that as being also an advantage? Mr. Seymour answered that it was. Do you see that as the same?
yes, as I referenced before, our growth strategy for the city will look at overlapping. Marty's talked about agriculture, but we see significant opportunities in the trade show area to diversify into other core sectors. I'll just give you an example. We just finished a study in the metal fabrication manufacturing industry, and it's a $1.5 billion industry in this region. We see huge opportunities as a result of having expanded space and more space available to look at trade shows or that could come to the city, or we create new trade shows that would be sustainable on an annual basis.
Thanks. So one more question for you. Mr. Allen may not appreciate this question, but it seems to me that not everybody wants to eat every meal when they're at a trade show area, that they in fact go out to restaurants. I remember a number of years ago hearing that maybe on a per capita basis, Regina has a higher number than other cities. So we have lots of restaurants. So I'm sure Ms. Fallman here, representing her friends, has a vested interest in the success here. It would seem to me restaurants do as well. Give me a comment on that.
Mr. Lee?
Absolutely, yes. This is huge. And I think we got to also be aware there's a number of, Tracy's mentioned hotels, there's a number of new restaurants that have come into the sector, and it's a fairly competitive business. The more opportunities we can provide to increase more customers for those businesses will be very supportive of the longer-term growth strategy for the region.
So I hope that they will be approached to come and help with the construction or whatever.
Absolutely.
I'm counting on you, John, on that. So I'll go to Mr. Allen, if I could, for a little bit. Mark, you made reference to a number of buildings going to come down, so it's going to change the footprint in the park. So I can't remember, because I've asked you this question before, but there's all these buildings are coming down, you're putting up this other building. Now there's some open space. So I never miss an opportunity to talk about parking. So does this increase the parking in the park?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, certainly it will increase the parking. I don't have the exact number, and I anticipated this question tonight, but the two areas where there'll be increased parking as a result of sort of a consolidation of our footprint will be north of this building, between the building and the Pasco Hospital site, or behind, if you wish, the Cooperators Center, where we have some overflow parking now. It'll have some additional space there. The other area is, if you are familiar with the grounds and you come in off the Louvain straight ahead where those buildings are currently located, they'll be gone, and that will become parking in that area. The new building will be to your left as you come in from the Louvain, adjacent to the Canada Centre building. So it opens up more space there as well. I'd be reluctant to speculate, but I can guarantee you there's a significant amount of improved parking.
So I'm going to tell you what I think I heard. I think I heard that the Pasco Street could become an entrance gate, or off of Pasco there, that would also allow for parking to use the Cooperator Center back entrance, I'll call it, so that it changes that dynamics as well.
Yeah. The other thing it does do is it cuts off that Barn Row exit, but I think really we weighed that off, and I think the pluses for the guests coming to the grounds of being able to stay indoors and with the large footprint of events be entirely indoors, I think is a big plus.
Right. Mark, there's a brief note in here about employees and the number that you would have. If you're successful in this trade show, would that suggest, at least to me it does, that there would be some more full-time employment or more regular employment for more people and keeping more of the employees busy more of the time? Because I know you have some casuals and so on.
Yeah, we have about 80% casual part-time, about 20% full-time. But what we've seen with our business growth so far, I expect to see continue, where there'd be increased full-time and casual part-time staff. A lot of that has, where we put them depends on a couple of things, but mainly it's the occupancy of the building and the volume of business. I think our business projections, we sort of have the business building over the first 3 years of operation, and so I'm certain that we'll be adding more employment as part of this.
Thanks. Can you tell me of another city in Western Canada or Canada that would have the modern age structure that you will have in a couple of years that can compete at that level with new, efficient buildings and size, considering all what you'll have there? Does anybody compare?
Your Worship, again, they're not mine, but they're ours. But I get the gist of it. But really, I can't think of a place. We've done some traveling around looking at stadiums too. I can't think of another location. You've traveled as well, where we would have a combination of a CFL franchise or a Canadian Football League type franchise, large stadium. WHL, home of the Regina Pats arena, as well as the Convention Center, International Trade Center, all under one roof. I was just down to the Pan Am Games. I mean, Exhibition Place in Toronto is a big, impressive property, but it, that'd be the only one that really comes to mind that might be anywhere close.
Good. Last question. Has anybody come forward, complained about losing some of the historical notion of the park or the value of those old buildings? Has anybody said you don't knock them down?
No, I haven't had that that question yet, but certainly I have had questions along that angle, and really it revolves around, I think, the affinity that a lot of people and memories they have from being on the property over the years. For the livestock exhibitors, there's one livestock exhibitor that was at the announcement last week that was looking at the bricks behind the speaker's platform, saying this is usually where he stabled his horses. So Bill Ollie might want that brick. And but I think with the exhibition stadium, a 1919 building, it has a proud history, and a thought, it's not a commitment at this point, but I think an angle that we're wanting to pursue is have a salute to the exhibition stadium in the new building somehow. I think probably visually, and maybe a sample brick or something from it. But certainly there's a lot of history that took place in the community in exhibition stadium up until the time we quit producing ice in there 5 years ago.
Yeah. So just a quick comment, and I'm done. When I was 6 years old, Mayor Henry Baker bought me a hot dog in that stadium. So at the new place, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donald, for that enlightenment. Councilor Hinks.
Yeah, Councilor O'Donnell and I both have a connection to the stadium because that's where we played our minor hockey, and I was wondering if I could get one of those poles that you have to look around to see the game. But actually, on all seriousness, he mentioned employees and that. I'd like to hear a little bit. I know what your policy about the partnerships with the local community and hiring in the community with people that really need the jobs.
Through your worship, our diversity numbers we collect annually and provide to council annually, but I think we're in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% inner city and First Nations employment. Increasingly, our diversity is much broader, as is the community, than only First Nations in terms of country of origin. We have significant Filipino, new Canadians, new Reginans working. Kitchen staff has pretty strong Filipino content and other aspects. We have a lot of people from Southeast Asia. We have people that are of the Muslim faith that are a part of our staff now, too. So we have a combination of inner city and new Canadians in a fairly significant way, and I will be bringing that information on an annual basis to council as I have in the past.
Perfect, thank you. The mayor said I could only
you had one question, that's it.
But I am asking two.
Councilor Hinks? One question.
What's that?
One more question.
Okay. Has there been any discussion or thoughts went into like where the liquor store is there? Because that property would probably be really valuable to add some sort of service to the exhibition grounds, whether that be another hotel or some sort of service. Has there been any talk about that? Because the liquor store doesn't need to be there.
Well, if you ask the exhibition exhibitors, they might say something different.
The hotel will have one in it.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Hinks.
Through you, no, we haven't looked at that property. I think council may recall, though, it's important to note that we did sell off some of the land in that northwest corner that allowed for the hotel development that's there and the Regina Capel Health Region, the Pasco Hospital parking in the past number of years, and that money was provided to us for some capital improvements on the property.
Other questions of the delegation? I have a couple. I want to explore the private sector stakeholder investment and part of the, I guess, the $5.4 million. Any comments from anyone in the delegation about how that would work? You can see the recommendations before us. You can see the announcement made last Thursday and what our commitment is here. There is a gap of $5.4 million. A comment by anyone on I'm not asking for any commitments other than you understand the importance of you collectively, that is, and others who may be involved, understand the importance of that gap being filled. Any comments by anyone? Mr. Allen?
Yes, well, certainly we've been talking to the Regina Hotels Association and Canadian Western Agribition about that gap, and following council's decision, and we will look at the size of the gap and the way it will be filled, but certainly we're mindful of our commitment at Evraz Place to the property. We've got a strong interest from our committee partners that are here with us this evening. And there may be some other possibilities yet to be explored. Certainly, though, I want to underline that contributions of the nature that were announced last week and potentially here tonight will go a very long way for a major project, and we don't see it as a major barrier.
Good. Thank you for that. If there's no other questions, you can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at the report for CM 15-7, the International Trade Center at Evraz Place. Can I have a motion on this, please? Councillor Hanks moves, and seconder, please. Okay. Councillor Hawkins, speakers to the report. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an easy recommendation to support, and I say that for three reasons. First of all, keep in mind that it's the city that owns this property. We invest as a city $11 million, and that attracts an investment from other levels of government of $22 million, plus $5 million more from those who are willing to donate. You know, it's as if you had a house that needed renovating, and somebody said to you, well, if you fix up your bathroom, we'll fix up your kitchen, and by the way, we'll finish your basement as well. You can't say no to a deal like that. It's a great deal for the city. Secondly, there's only two choices here. It's either fix it up or tear it down. And I think this is an opportunity for us to take a crumbling asset and turn it into a highly productive asset, and I'm confident it'll be that given the business plans that which you've heard about tonight going forward. And finally, and hasn't been mentioned, I love the name International Trade Center. It's the right branding for this facility. This is a province where 69 cents of every dollar that's earned in this province comes from trade which we do with the rest of the world, much of that trade in agriculture. So that have a facility here named the International Trade Center puts the focus on our economy and on the strength of our economy exactly where it should be. So for those three reasons, Your Worship, I'm pleased to support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers? No other speakers? I will, okay, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I share a lot of Councillor Hawkins' sentiment on this one, although I don't consider it an easy consideration. It's certainly a lot of money. Here are some of the things that are on my mind. It is money that we have in reserve. So as the report mentions, using money from reserve as opposed to borrowing money, it's about $5 million in interest that we wouldn't be paying on that money. So that's something to consider. It's a year-round space. Surely this is an event space that can be used all year, just not in the summer. Also, the leveraging aspect is important. It's about 3.45 to 1, so that's to say for every dollar we put in, we're leveraging another $3.45. We're only paying about 28% of the whole total. Also, I do believe that this will bring added capacity, so not only support the events that are there already, but I do believe when the delegation says, you know, it has the opportunity to attract new events to the city. I think that's true. So again, that's not a decision to be taken lightly. It's a lot of money, and even though we have the money, at the end of the day, we can't have everything, so it's prioritizing $11 million on this versus what else that could buy. So we have to appreciate this is at the expense of being able to do other things with that money. But I think given, especially the fact that we're leveraging money from both levels of government, I think this is a decent investment for our city, and I plan to support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers? Councillor Murray, can you take the seat, please?
Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I rise to speak in the strongest terms of support for this facility. And I do so because if you look at the investment that we need to have for the city, you look at Evraz Place, the strategic plan that's been put forward, the next step in moving forward is so critically important for us. We spoke for many years about the dilapidation of these 13 buildings that are going to be coming down. We're building a world-class city. We're investing all the time, people moving here from all over the world, from across Canada, and we're looking at building our infrastructure. I can't think of a more effective way to invest in our infrastructure when two orders of government will cover 2/3 of the cost of that. And it's not without a lot of work being done behind the scenes before we got here today, both from our administration, both for Alvarez Place and our community partners, many of whom are here tonight. It is by partnerships, it is by planning, it is by understanding priorities that we got here today. We did this very strategically, very thoughtfully. And we know the buildings are in bad shape. We know we had to do something. So that something is a review or a study on a marketing or business case as to why we need these buildings changed in the first place. Aside from the fact that we could lose Agribition, Farm Progress Show, and so many other events that would never come here that we couldn't even quantify them. So we do a business plan and find that, yes, it is a multi-purpose facility, and Councilor Hinks, you're absolutely right on all your questioning. It is much more than 2 events. Those events are very important for our economy and who we are as a city and a province. Agriculture, no question. But so much more we can use that for, and the business case showed that. Then we did another review as to let's design this and make sure that we meet the needs of our community. What does Agribition need? What does Farm Progress need? What does Alvarez Place need to present this as a multi-purpose facility that can be used throughout the year? So the announcement last Thursday was excellent. It showed, we have on the website a very nice design that meets everyone's expectations and needs. This is so important for our community. And it's beyond just the numbers which are important. It's beyond the economic impact. It's about our city and who we are as a city. We have one of the best facilities in Canada now when this is constructed. It's fantastic. I hope members of council will support this. I'll speak when I process my final comments. And, well, maybe not. It's not that profound, you know. It really isn't.
Good.
Not that profound at all. It's, you know, we had a announcement last week that supposes that City Council was going to provide support, and I'm sure we will. But I want to speak to how hard it is and difficult it is to get 3 orders of government together that have different decision-making cycles and different ways to make decisions. So this council, this administration understands the need to be flexible and to seize the opportunity here. So we had it a bit backwards, the announcement that then we get approval from council. And that's just sometimes tough. Not always the best way to do that. But you rise above that because you know ultimately what we're getting here is a world-class facility for a world-class city. I hope members of council will support this. Thank you. Other speakers on the report? We'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Now we'll move on to our next. Unless we were to take a 5-minute break, of course, that might be nice if someone wanted to take a.
Go ahead and move a 5-minute recess.
10 minutes?
So make it 10 minutes.
Seconder for the motion?
15?
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
You're going higher.
Back at.
Oh. Okay, you couldn't have scripted that.
No kidding.
Well, just one more thing to say.
One more. I know we're getting ready. It's on fire right now.
Good. Actually, I'm feeling really good.
Oh, it's good that we arranged for Linda. Can you do that for me?
Yeah. What a powerful mayor, eh? The Thunder Gods.
told him that too. I told him, you had your finger in every little bit of piece of plywood, everything, and you thought you could change the world.
Well, to see what the woman's doing, right?
Yeah, yeah, let's tell tales at home.
So were you interested in one of the things we had on the menu, or was it?
No, I think we were
just his father?
I'd like to call the meeting back to order, if I could, please. We have another delegation on, this is the Northwest School site. We have Evan Hunchak from Dream Development. Come forward and identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for a presentation, and there may be questions of members of council afterwards. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of City Council to speak before you tonight. My name is Evan Hunchak. I'm the General Manager at Dream Development. Dream would like to extend our best to the developer of Skywood. As we know, the school site there would have been a key development feature. And it's unfortunate that that did not work out for that neighborhood. The other neighborhoods that we've developed in the near vicinity of Lakeridge and Lakeridge Addition would have also benefited from that school site. But through the circumstances are unfortunate, we believe what's most important for Northwest Regina is that the retention of the school site is kept intact and not lost due to an appropriate site not being available. To that end, we'd like to congratulate Rosewood Alliance Church along with their partner New Rock Development, who will be preparing the school site. We're happy to see that their partnership will bring the school to the Rosewood Park neighborhood within Coopertown, and being within the larger Coopertown area, Rosewood School also brings a positive community building element to this neighborhood, which will be home to population in the future of close to 37,000 people and likely one of 6 joint-use elementary school sites which will be made up in the neighborhood. As a property owner within the Rosewood concept plan area, Dream has also been collaborating with the Alliance Church. Together we are currently preparing the Rosewood concept plan as well as the Coopertown neighborhood plan, both of which will incorporate the revisions required to accommodate the P3 school. As the administration's report notes, the timeline is quite aggressive in order to get the service site prepared by end of October of this year. In recognition of this, and given the advanced planning work we've already done within our Elmbridge neighborhood, which is just to the south of the Rosewood Park neighborhood in Coopertown, Dream's willing to offer at our own expense and risk to continue planning and engineering to prepare a potential backup site and park space in the event the Rosewood site is not realized. If all goes as planned and as recommended by the Executive Committee and the schools developed in the Rosewood Park area, then this would simply become part of our Phase 1 of the Coopertown area and proceed upon conclusion of the phasing and financing growth study, which is scheduled for Council this October. The school site we would prepare would be held for a future school site in Coopertown. As I've indicated, there's upwards of potentially 6 school sites for this new community, which would build out over the 300,000 population range as outlined in the OCP. This approach is consistent with the draft joint neighborhood plan, the information presented thus far in the phasing and financing growth study, and would be respectful of the interim phasing and financing policy. This approach also provides additional security towards retaining the school, as we believe the worst case scenario for the community is one which Regina doesn't realize a school in the Northwest. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and for your consideration, and if you'd had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Hunchak, for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Thanks for your thoughts. Could you just describe for me a little bit? I want to be clear. So you are currently working with Rosewood Alliance in the area because you are a property owner in there as well?
Yeah, so the Rosewood Park concept plan area is approximately 2/4 sections, or 320 acres, give or take. And Dream would own about 50% of that land. Rosewood, we own the 50% on the west half of the site, and Rosewood Park Alliance Church has the 50% roughly by Courtney Street.
Right. So the area that council has already agreed that Rosewood could develop, does that include your land?
No. What council had approved for them to develop would only be 100% on their land.
Right. So not yours, though?
No.
Okay. But you are working with them so that there is a compatible development as it goes toward the west and toward the south?
Yeah, towards the west, to the south, in every direction, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does that include servicing the area?
Yeah, we've undertaken quite a bit of extensive engineering to so that the servicing for the whole area would, their temporary services would tie into the permanent servicing for the area once it's completed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and note that, of course, that Rosewood Park Group is in the audience. They're not a delegation, but they're here. We have the next communication from Mark Geiger, CP 15-10. A motion to accept that, please. As a communication. Councilor Flagel, seconder. Councilor O'Donnell. Any questions or comments on that report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll go to the main report, Northwest School Site. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 15-81. This is the Northwest School Site document. The recommendations within the report is that City Council delegate that the City Manager and Chief Executive Officer to allocate $6,045,000 funding to be provided by the Government of Saskatchewan for the acquisition of joint school sites that were previously approved in Report CR 14-131 to facilitate the development of a school site in Regina located off the proposed Rosewood Park Boulevard and the proposed extension of Mapleford Gate. Part 2, that the following amendments to the interim phasing and financing policy be approved. A, contrary to the interim phasing and financing policy, the City of Regina may provide funding for a portion of the infrastructure internal to the development of Rosewood Park neighborhood for the assistance of $6,045,000 from the Government of Saskatchewan. And B, contrary to the interim phasing and financing policy, City of Regina may provide funding for a portion of the water, wastewater, and stormwater projects in Rosewood Park neighborhood for the assistance of the $6,045,000 from the Government of Saskatchewan. And in Part 3, finally, City of Regina will assume no further financial risks within respect to this development. Your Worship, if we can have a seconder.
Seconder for that, please. Councilor Hawkins seconds it.
Well, it's been around and around the table lots, and I don't have a whole lot more to add to it. Obviously, adding school to our community, to our city is good, and we're going to move one step closer with a group that are going to be able to provide that. So I'm happy to move that report.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Are there speakers to the report? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of quick questions for administration here. Last June, Council saw a report, CR 14-72, interim phasing and financing. So I'm taking from page 15, number 2. Building new neighborhoods without phasing requires the construction of multiple upfront large infrastructure pieces at the same time, requiring significant financial investment at a time when the city's debt capacity is limited. The city would not have the necessary financial resources to be able to complete the required construction. So is there still a business case for the City of Regina when we build new neighborhoods to do it in an order that makes most sense financially for us, the same as a private developer might within a development?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, this is specifically a policy question related to long-term growth and financing and the SAF review that's currently underway. I'll ask Ms. Lugner to provide a high-level response.
Ms. Lugner?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. The fundamental statements that were made in the report that you're referring to still do apply at this time. The Rosewood Park development includes interim financing, interim servicing, which would not be funded through city servicing agreement fees.
Okay, thanks for that. From last fall, September, EX 14-31, Rosewood Park Development Special Study. I quote, approval to advance the Rosewood Park lands as a concept plan and subsequent rezoning and subdivision are not recommended at this time for the following reasons. Number one, 1,000 residents, which is the applicant's proposed population based on the sanitary lift station upgrades, is not sufficient population to support the necessary elements of a complete neighborhood. Number two, the development would be fragmented and isolated from potentially many years given the cost to service the entire northwest neighborhood as identified during the creation of the interim phasing and financing plan. Is this still true? Is this still a concern?
Ms. Lugner or Ms. Folk? Ms. Lugner?
Through you, Your Worship, administration's statements do stand that 1,000 people is not enough to form a complete community.
Okay, thanks for that. So it's definitely a difficult situation this council has been put in. There's no shortage of need for school investment in Regina. Anyone with school-age children can attest to that, and this includes in the Northwest. but in my mind, to build a school in an area that likely won't see significant population or be a complete community, for over a decade. Our report says potentially 10 or 15 years before we see that. In my mind, that speaks to like the provincial government's mandate here to build a bunch of schools at once. Like it helps that problem, but to me, it doesn't really speak to smart or good city planning. You can imagine in 15 years, kids that enter kindergarten will graduate elementary school, and then the kids that are in kindergarten when they're in grade 8 will graduate potentially before it's really a complete community. So it's not an easy situation we've been put in. I think potentially people on council feel like we don't have an option. I think we do have an option, actually. I think we can just say no. I think if this is right, if this isn't the right thing for our city at this time, if it doesn't speak to smart urban planning, it's not ideal. We need schools, but like I say, there's lots of places that need schools. So why rush into some development that, ultimately our job is to make sure we leave a good legacy of development. And to rush into this, in my mind, the right decision is for us to say no at this time. And we need another school. Definitely, we need many more schools in the city. We should sort that out in the right way, not the quickest way. So I plan not to support this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's a bogus argument to say that this isn't a complete neighborhood for this school. This school is right next to all the Northwest area schools that are now overcrowded and need help. And so this is not just a school for that neighborhood that's not built yet. It's a school that's needed in that area for the overcrowding. And so I'm going to support this. I couldn't in conscience say not to build a school when we have a chance to build one. And that the government is going to be building the school for us. And so I think this just has to happen. The other thing that I would say is that when these new schools are built now, they are built with a central core and enough rooms to hold students that are going to be going to it now, but they also are partly portable, and other portables can be added. So this is a school that will probably be able to be expanded in the future as the neighborhood builds up around it. So I think it's needed now, and I think it will be needed in the future, and it's close to built-up neighborhoods. So I'm going to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers? Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. I rise just in discussion. I questioned right at the very beginning of the report. It says 6.045 million is to be given. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was 3 million of that not paid back on the Harvard Geiger through sale of land down the road, and now it was only 3 million on the hook for the city and not 6 million?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, the 6.045 million was broken into two elements and components. So 3 million for infrastructure costs direct to the developer to service the site because of the timelines related to having the site in place. The 3.045 billion was to upfront costs, if required, and then for those to be paid back to the city and paid into the dedicated municipal reserve fund. Those are tenets of the business deals that we're continuing to have conversations and discussions related to.
So should that not be put on the report, that it's split into two, as opposed, because the way it looks right now is we're giving them $6.45 million and no payback?
I think the report does say that, though, inside the report. I think the number is a global number, but is broken down inside the report.
Well, if I read the first executive committee, number 1 says nothing about it, number 2 says nothing about it, and those are the recommendations.
But within
regardless of what it says in the report, the recommendations are not what they are, is what I'm trying to get at, first of all, because there should be a provision in here that says 3.045 million is not going to be free, or however we want to word it.
Ms. Folk?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. The 3.45 in recommendation 1 is related to the contribution agreement with the province. In terms of, I'll direct you to page 19 of the report, in terms of financial implications, that discusses the allocations that have been discussed previously with this business deal related to servicing the site in Northwest Regina, as well as the tenants we've been working forward.
Okay, I just wanted clarification so that it's not all there for them. With the timelines that have been changing and everything, what happens if Rosewood, for whatever reason, because of timelines, I mean, can't make this work for whatever, I don't know. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. I'm just saying right now, if they, let's say they can't make it work, we have a deadline of October 31st, or do we have a deadline of last Monday when we had to make the decision to move it to Rosewood? Where are we with the deadline? Because if this doesn't fall into the right timeline, 2017 September may not happen according to the P3 and according to the contractor. So how do we guarantee that it is going to happen in the next month?
Hard to answer hypothetical
Well, no,
situation, but let's see if the administration can help us out.
Sure.
Through you, Your Worship, October 31st, from what we understand from the province, is a firm deadline. In terms of mitigating risk, we've assigned a full-time project manager and have rededicated resources to work through this. We've got some staffing estimates, so between now and the end of October, we're allocating 1.75 FTEs to ensure that we move forward with this.
Okay. And as far as services that they're going to tie into existing, or are they bringing on new services from across? Are they going to bring their own services, or are they going to come across from Maple Ridge or Daglish or Rochdale, or where's all this going to come from? Because there's definitely a different budget line for services than there was in the Lake Ridge Edition Skywood. So could you comment on that, please?
Through you, Your Worship, we are working on a site-specific servicing. Our teams have been in conversation and discussions, and I'll ask Ms. Lugner to provide additional details.
Ms. Lugner?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. We are working the details out for the engineering servicing. The services for wastewater will come through the Maple Ridge Lift Station, which is essentially immediately adjacent to the property in question at Rosewood Church. And the water will be run from the east side of Courtney Street along to the west side of Courtney Street. Stormwater will be managed on an interim basis through an existing drainage run that goes to the west. And previous transportation studies have indicated that there's sufficient road capacity on Courtney Street that no widening will be warranted at this time.
So if I can ask the question, so all of the issues that we talked about with Skywood in terms of low capacity, timing of population, tying into Lake Ridge Edition being a problem for all the new resident and the school, tying into Pasco Street wouldn't work. None of those problems are going to persist in the Skywood development because they're going to tie into all the services that were already paid for by somebody else. Is that correct?
Ms. Lugner?
Through you, Your Worship, there will be upgrades that will be required in order to accommodate the development. That's what the $6.045 million will be put towards.
Okay.
The balance of the servicing will come from the east, and it's typical for any new development to tie into existing infrastructure from adjacent neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And then one other thing was
Councillor
that
Flego, your time is winding up.
close, yeah. Population, the reason Skywood was picked was population today and future. So I agree with what Councillor Fraser is saying. But the school is definitely needed in the Northwest, and if it's Rosewood, let's go with Rosewood, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, we need to look at other options, maybe to go back to Skywood. And I'm just throwing that out there as a hypothetical, but it's a fact that we need to make sure that we have a plan in place that if something goes wrong, we have a secondary choice. So, just saying.
Thanks. Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So I was not part of your deliberations that you got to this decision, so I'm going to have to ask some questions that will take us back a little bit. I want to make a couple of things clear first. I'm going to talk a little bit about core services. I want to ask a little bit about financial. I want to make sure that Rosewood understands I like your plan, I like what you're doing, but I didn't agree with the timeline, and that hasn't changed. I want to be clear about that. And I want to ask a question first and foremost, no matter which one of these options I look at, it refers to a full-time project manager. Can I ask who's paying for that?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, it is coming out of city resourcing.
Okay. We'll look at an option for that. So when we do a core services review now or into the future, are we looking at the ability for us to deliver on education and education land? Is that one of our core services now? So this has been, I know that we had talked about this before, but now we have the opportunity to talk about it again. And it doesn't please me. It doesn't please me at all. In the report, it basically states that somebody else can't afford it at this point in time, so would you look after it? So now I find out that in order for us to have this go ahead, and from what I read, our staff have been running around for weeks, meeting with all sorts of people to try and put something together. Who's not doing this? Are we now funding education? And is this now part of our mandate? And is this now part of our core services review? So I have a problem. I want to ask about the financial status of what I see here. So I understand that the government has given this $6+ million. Did they do that on the other two sites as well? Is this a 6, 6, and 6?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, the 6.045 was all three sites
Each individually the same?
combined, with the proviso that the city could allocate that
Right.
to address the servicing requirements in Northwest Regina
Okay.
due to the stage of planning and servicing. So the other two site locations were further in the process and were closer to servicing.
So does that mean that the other two sites don't cost us any money, that somebody else is just looking after this and providing this gratis? Is it zero for us, $0 involved?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, that would be correct. The developers have put in all of the infrastructure.
Okay, so they're biting the bullet. So when I look at the options that are here, and I see the $3 million from the province for infrastructure, I got it, 3.05. The way I read this is that on one of the options, the one that would have been Coopertown, they are saying they do not need that 3.05, and then in fact we can keep that money and put it into municipal reserve dedicated funds. Is that true? So we don't have to wait for our repayment.
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, if you're referring to option related to Elmbridge, that would be correct.
Thank you. So I want to put an addendum on the amendment on the floor, if I could, please. And then I will speak to after that, I have a few other comments. First amendment I would like to make is that if this goes through, that the province be requested to pay for the cost of a full-time project manager until this can come through. Have a seconder, please. Thank you. So my point is that if this is not to cost us money, and this is part of education, then it should be paid for by the province. And the timelines are not set by us, so the very minimum we can do is at least ask for that money. On the amendment, I'll sit down.
To the amendment, Councilor Bryce?
Thank you. I understood when you spoke through you, Mr. Mayor, that you actually said it was a 1.75 FTE, not just a 1. So I just wanted to clarify what it actually is.
Correct. So since giving the direction to go back and look what it would take to resource this, when we look combined to get through the approval process, ensure we have a servicing agreement in place, and also project manage through to construction very closely with the developer, our team is assessed it will be about 2,600 person hours between now and the end of October. That equates to about 1.75 FTE, assuming that an FTE functions at about 70% capacity given vacation, yada, yada, yada. So,
is that annually or just for that period of time? Is that annualized, 1.75 for the whole year, or you just for the 3 months?
Just for the 3 months.
Okay.
Thank you. I just thought I'd clarify that.
Good. Any other speakers on the amendment? Councilor Fraser to the amendment.
Question for administration, something brought up by Councilor Donald in regards to their amendment. Mentioned that the other two sites, there's no cost.
On the amendment no, I want you to speak to the amendment, which is that we would support the province paying a full cost for a project manager. That's the subject matter.
Okay.
That's the subject matter.
Sure. The amendment being the province paying the full cost. That this now comes out of green space. Can you please, is there a cost to the city or to the citizens in these new neighborhoods that, this land comes out of green space? Sorry, it comes out of municipal reserve is what I mean to say. Whereas before 2011, it would have been purchased outside of the 10% of municipal reserve. Can someone speak to that, please? Thanks.
Ms. Falk?
Through your worship. So I talked earlier about the $3 million and the $3.045 million and the $3.045 million being paid back to the city. The intent of that amount was to ensure that the city was compensated for all 3 school sites.
Right.
So I'll ask, I want you to go back to the intent of you've already got your question on that.
Yeah.
Councilor Fraser, so either it's on the full-time project manager or it's out of order.
Well, what I'm not clear about is that the full-time...
You had your chance. Maybe someone else can answer the question for you. You're on an amendment. Speak to the amendment.
The amendment is to cover the full cost of the city of this change.
No, it's a full-time project manager.
Okay. Do we have a notion of how much that is worth? Thanks.
Ms. Falk?
Through your worship, 1.75 estimated at $90,000 a year, roughly $175,000.
Okay, well, I plan to support the amendment, even though it's a fraction of the real cost of the city, which would be about $15 million worth of municipal reserve. Thank you.
I'd like to clarify this, Ms. Falk. Annualized 175, but you said it was only for a 3-month period. So we're paying that much for 3 months of 1 3/4 time?
We're accelerating the process, your worship. So in order to move through the review process, when we factor in everybody's time from all the areas throughout the organization, the estimate that we've identified is 2,600 hours between now and the end of October. So since last week, we've had 4 people pretty much working full-time on this over the course of the week. And that's just based on where we're at in the planning process and all of the engineering, detailed design needing to happen, being reviewed, et cetera.
Okay. On the amendment, I'll support the amendment, but it's not contingent upon approval, but certainly sending a note to the province, we expect them to pay that. I'll support that. Councilor Bryce.
Sorry to speak twice. Just to clarify.
Just to clarify, but not to speak.
Yeah. Are we talking the full cost of the project managers or the cost of a full-time project manager? I just want clarification from the mover.
Councilor Donald.
I was seeking the full cost that it would take for us to bring this project to fruition. And while I referenced a full-time manager, it is whatever it takes to have this meet somebody else's timeline.
On the amendment, Councilor Burnett.
I guess just some clarification. I think in the last meeting on the screen, point 3 said that the city will not assume no further financial risk. Can this position of the project manager not be absorbed out of the $6 million from the province, and we just reduce that by $1 million that would be transferred to the developer? I guess when we approved point 3 in previous the executive, I think that kind of, in my mind, covered any additional costs such as this. So just a question for clarification.
Ms. Falk?
The 6.45 through you, your worship, is available for site servicing, period.
Getting bogged down here. Okay. Councilor Hawkins, you.
Thank you, your worship. I understand Councilor O'Donnell's frustration when he says, does core services include education? Are we now funding education? That is a very big and important debate, and one day we will have it. But I just don't think it's worth having that debate over $150 $50,000 or $70,000 in the context of this debate. I think we're just poking needles in people's eyes with this to no end. I'd rather have that debate in a proper context, and I don't think this is it. So I'm not going to support this amendment.
Other comments on the amendment? I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? It's carried. You have about a minute and a half left on your time on the main motion.
I'm going to have to start timing myself then.
Yeah, you're going to have to.
So I appreciate that went on the floor. So I have a second request. And so if I could just add a second amendment, please, I would like to have a future report back from administration about the implications of us being involved in education funding and how we avoid, in my view, how we avoid that. But I'm looking for long-term implications here, if I could. That's not very well said, but I'd like a report back to the administration about the implications of the decisions that are affecting us in terms of education. That will bring about that debate.
Seconder for that motion, Councillor Flagel. Speakers to the amendment?
I just want to clarify. So which committee do you want this report going to, and what kind of timeline do you want on it, just so that...
Timeline would be January 1st. Which committee? Executive.
Thank you.
Any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Marie, you want to take the chair, please?
Your Worship.
I understand the frustration of Councillor Dowell. I think we all share that. We're here because of the province making effectively a unilateral decision on how it wants to prepare school sites in a subdivision and wants the city to be involved with this. We all know how we got here. We're going to have a report anyway on this. SUMA is preparing its discussion on the amendments that's coming forward. We will be doing this in any case. We as a city both to help provide our position to SUMA. Lobbying efforts, I've spoken with the Minister, the Premier, and others. And as members of Council rightly do, speaking to members of the Legislature about this all the time. We're going to get a report back in any case, and we have to do that. So I'll support the amendment, but let's be clear here. The frustration that's being shown here, rightly so, the mechanisms are already in place to talk about that. They're already in place. The amendments that the province is putting forward are subject to review by SUMA. They're subject to review by members of administrations across this province for urban municipalities. It's already there. Any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. SUMA is a very important and effective body. Also, I think that this challenge in Regina is unique. It's not the same as it is in Weyburn or Cardiff or Glenewan or wherever. I think the idea of having this in Regina context is the right thing for us to do, so I'd like to support this amendment. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Other speakers on the amendment? I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I believe I have a minute.
Time's almost up.
I have a minute left. I believe I was timing on that last 30 seconds. So, one,
you have actually less than that, but go ahead.
One, I wanted to put these things on the floor because I wanted us to make sure that we had debated those. But in terms of what is the recommendations, I cannot support them, and I will not support them. I think it was said earlier by perhaps Councillor Fraser, my first choice is not to go here at all, period. And I believe that it is somebody else's responsibility, i.e. under legislation, to follow through and find a school site, not for us to run around. So I won't be supporting that. But I will be asking for each of these motions to be separated, if I could, and have a vote on them, so that we can, if it does go through, I can at least support these other ones. Thanks.
Councillor Hinks.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to thank Pastor Weeks and the Rosewood Alliance Church organization for all the work you've done to put in this. And I know there was a lot of sleepless nights at the end that when you were getting the report and everything ready and the plan ready. And I think it's exciting for Northwest Regina. And in talking with Pastor Weeks, I know that the attainable housing part is going to happen right away, too. It's not something that's put on a back burner. It's ready to go, and I think that's exciting for Northwest Regina. And if this goes through, I want to welcome him to Ward 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, we do not have the option of just saying no. I completely agree with what Councillor Young has said. There is a need for a school in Northwest Regina. If we just say no, it means that hundreds of school children will have to wait for that school, and I don't think that that is a viable course of action. I especially don't think it's a viable course of action to be making the points, which are important points that Councillor O'Donnell's been making. So I don't think we can say no. I'm satisfied that Rosewood, very satisfied that Rosewood is an appropriate option for us to go forward. It is the best option that we had in front of us. I am pleased with the administration's efforts, which were outlined here tonight, to work with Rosewood and get the services in place. I am reinforced in my belief by Dream's offer to assist Rosewood in this. So I think now we have a very, very viable option going forward. So I think that all things considered, Rosewood is an important and a good choice. One other point, whether 1,000 people are a complete community, no community is a complete community on day one, but Rosewood will grow into a complete community, will grow into a complete, vibrant, diversified community as quickly as any area. And so I think for that reason as well, it's a good place for the school. I'll support this option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers? Councillor Murray, can you
Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Let's remember for a moment how we got to this point. And it's been alluded to some degree by members of council. But we got here because the province has decided it wants to do two things: to build new schools, which I think we all agree is a good idea. Whether it's a P3 is secondary to issue, but they want to do that. I think it's important that these schools be built to reflect the growth of our community. So in that, I think we're all united. We want the school here. We want these 3 schools built. But underneath all that is this issue of how, in one sense, the province has said, we're not going to play by the rules we had before. We can't afford to do this. So we're going to have the city become involved and become involved in education. So that's a problem. We said that before. It's nothing new. So we can lobby and will lobby and strenuously say we do not support amendments in the future that would put the city in line for providing support for education. It's not what we do as a municipality. That's a separate argument for another day. We can't change that reality right now. What we can talk about is that we thought we had a site in Northwest Regina, which unfortunately did not work out for a number of reasons. And we had to scramble. We as a city had to scramble, and so did lots of other people around the city in different sites to do the same kind of scrambling to get this done. I unequivocally support this recommendation in absolute terms. This administration, this council, this executive committee reviewed what is available. Rosewood was already approved for development in interim financing, phasing financing, already approved to go forward. This council said yes to that. What's the next logical place? It's Rosewood. Clearly it is. Now, we hope, given the shortness of time, they will be able to build the school, not for lack of effort, but a very short time frame that once again is superimposed on us by the province, unfair to everyone, to every site, frankly, particularly this one, because we knew at the beginning this was a precarious site. That's come to pass. I absolutely, unequivocally support this as a way to go forward. There's no other option here. Because we said, we approved this area, Rosewood. So why would we do this one? Why would we take them out of the step and say, well, some other place will go for them out of step? That would really hurt the integrity of our development and planning system to do that. And part of what we want to do is ensure we have integrity in our system that's transparent. That's key. No question about that. And I think I heard some of the delegation speak earlier, they actually support this. Dream, Harvard, in other times they said they support this. I think we should have, in my view, have no option but to support this. But the bottom line is, we need a school. So it might be in a bit of a pickle here and into a corner that's not particularly great. But we have to do this. Keep our eye on the ball here. What's the purpose of this here? But I want to go back to this issue of complete neighborhoods. And to state my view, which others have said, no subdivision or area is a complete community until it's built. It just isn't possible. Harbor Landing wasn't a complete community until it was built. So we see the plan for Rosewood. We see the plan that's around the area that will be taking place soon, I hope. We can say it's 5, 6, 10 years before we see full development, but the market decides that's not us. We set the rules of engagement, and the market decides the pace and timing of all development. There is no option, in my view. Our option cannot be to say no, because we would wear this as a city council. We said no to a school. I urge members of council to support this tonight. Let's move on to other issues that are even more important for our city. Thank you. Other speakers? So we will do the following. The original motions put forward, we'll vote on that at once. And the two amendments by Councillor Donald will be voted separately. Are we clear? So in the first part of the motion, without the amendments, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. To the First Amendment, that the province be requested, I don't know why we're doing this. I guess we'll do it again. They be requested to pay the full cost related required to project development. I'm going to call the question on that one. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report back from the administration on January 2016 to the Executive Committee outlining implications from this decision regarding education and the city's responsibilities. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Good. So we'll move on to the next report then. The boundary alteration implementation, Finance Administration Committee meeting. This is Councillor Murray. Oh, do we? That's right. Yes, I do. Sorry, we changed it around. Canada 150. Let's see if I can get my order here. Right, I got it here. Okay. This is City Manager's report, so you know, mover for that?
Yep. Thanks, Your Worship. I'll move CR 15-8. This is the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. So recommendations coming from the City Manager's report are three parts. One, that the following projects be approved for consideration as part of the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. The program for, number one, Confederation Park upgrade. Number two, Northwest Leisure Centre, accessible playground and site redevelopment. And third, the Northwest Leisure Centre indoor swimming pool improvements. Part 2, that the city manager or his designate be authorized to negotiate funding through the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program for its projects identified in the recommendation 1, in accordance with the terms and conditions of the program. And Part 3, that the city clerk be authorized to sign the applicable funding agreements on behalf of the city once the agreement has been reviewed and approved by the city solicitor. If we can have a secondary, Your Worship.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hinks.
Thanks, Councillor Hinks. The monies aren't huge, but the importance of celebrating the 150 and being able to tie some of these things together, Your Worship. Confederation Park, obviously near and dear to our community, but right next to our brand new stadium would be another fine location, as well as the other 2 sites with the Northwest Leisure Centre. So all the way through, we've got 3 really good candidate locations, and so I just look for approval. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Other speakers to the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. I just want to ask if we are approved by any of these. I seek some clarity on where our funding would come from, our portion of the funding. I'm assuming nothing would happen this year and it would be a 2016 project. Does it just become part of budget at that time?
Mr. Davies, you want to take that?
Mr. Mayor, through you, these are projects that are at various stages of development within the city's planning process. So in theory, it will come out of a capital program that is yet to be approved.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 1582, and this is the 2013 Boundary Alteration Implementation. The recommendations coming from Finance Administration Committee meeting of July 7th is one part that City Council delegate the administration the authority to request Crown utility service providers to charge and remit to the City of Regina surcharge on lands absorbed in the 2009 and 2013 boundary alterations and all subsequent boundary alterations. Your Worship, those are the recommendations coming before us from Finance Administration.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hinks again. Questions, comments on this report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks to the administration. So is this always something that we have to apply for? This is not an automatic, as we very publicly change our boundaries and state where we are and so on. Does no one else notice that? We just have to apply?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, I'll ask Ms. Lugner to comment. Her team's been managing this. Actually, I guess Mr. Capers is going to speak.
Please. John.
Through you, Mr. Your Worship, it is something that is applied for through the province, and it is something that is done. Council did this in 2013 to actually make formal application to the province to have the boundary altered.
Okay. And there's no issue with us being retroactive? Does that mean we'll get money from a long time ago and now?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Worship, I maybe misunderstood the first question, because the application for the boundary alteration has taken place.
Okay.
I take it from the question that is being asked now, it's regarding the ability to charge back for surcharges for the utility surcharges from the Crown corporations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The indication from the Crown corporations is that we can charge back retroactively, but this is something that Council should consider carefully as to whether they wish to do that based on the indication to the alteration at the time. We found out that this is affected by 2 actual boundary alterations, the 2009 boundary alteration, which at that point in time was all bare land that the city brought into the city at that point in time. So therefore, there wouldn't have been any power or natural gas users at that point in time. The secondary one in 2013, there was approximately 30 residences that were out in the area, and possibly another 20 or so other users.
So it's not big numbers. I get it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Planning Commission, Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Application for excuse me, discretionary use, a proposed house form commercial office. The address is 2154 McIntyre. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Councilor Young.
Thank you. So this literally is a house right now. They want to make it into a business. So this is being consistent with the policy in the area. So no issues with this, and we would look for concurrence.
Comments or questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. A number of information reports on the Finance Administration, the Civic Annual Report, pension, the long-term disability, and the casual annual report.
Correct, Your Worship. Happy to move all three, R 15, 12, 13, and 14. We have a second, Your Worship.
Councilor Verdure, you second it? Okay. Any questions or comments? As we're thinking about this, I wonder if the administration would provide any update, if necessary, on the civic pension plan. Any updates where we're at with that?
Your Worship, are you referring to the status of
the status
of negotiations? Yes. I can advise Council that we are making progress with finalizing the legal framework documents, and we're in the process now of submitting those to the Superintendent of Pensions for their final review. We have been in discussions with the Superintendent's office about reviewing the changes to the regulations to give effect to the plan changes, and we still are targeting a series of ratifications of all of the sponsors in the plan in the month of September, with a target to bring all of the changes forward for final approval to this Council at the October 22nd meeting of Council.
Excellent. Great work being done there. Comments on any one of the three information reports? The motion is to accept all three. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaws. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward some bylaws for us. So I move, second by Councilor O'Donnell, let bylaws number 2015-47 and 2015-48 be introduced and read the first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, second by Councilor Hawkins, that bylaws number 2015-47 and 48 be read a second time.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, second by Councilor Fraser, that Council hereby consents to the bylaws number 2015-47 and 48 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councilor Vendura, that bylaws number 2015-47 and 2015-48 be read the third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Seconder? Councilor Bryce, do you have your hand up? Do you move it? I didn't hear you. Councilor Young, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening.